Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was in love with Haku. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by PsyckoSama and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, A Small Choice. Even as his killing intent faded, Naruto shook with rage and sorrow, fist trembling just inches from his foe's face. You're from that time, he whispered as he looked up at the girlish boy standing in front of him. He couldn't believe it. The nice person from the forest that had listened to his dream and the bastard ice demon who'd killed his teammate were the same person. He didn't want to believe it, but it was true. He wanted to scream to the skies at the indignity of it all as he fought his conflicting feelings. He was outraged by Sasuke's death. He'd never liked the bastard. He'd always been cocky and so self-superior, and when Sakura threw herself at him it made Naruto want to wring his scrawny little neck. But he couldn't just let Sasuke go unavenged. The bastard had been part of his team, if not one of the closest things to a friend he had, as depressing as that sounded. At the same time though, while he knew that Haku was the enemy, Naruto honestly didn't want to kill him. Haku had shown him kindness, and while it had only been brief and a bit embarrassing considering his confusion over the extremely girlish boy's gender, he'd been one of the few people to meet him, to listen to his dream, and express kindness and friendship rather than scorn or contempt. Why did you stop? Haku asked, looking down at Naruto as he shook with outrage and sadness. I killed your precious friend, yet you can't kill me? Naruto glanced over to Sasuke's body, where it lay riddled with needles, and was filled with a new burst of killing intent as he quivered with rage. Sasuke might have been a smug egomaniac, but he was his friend, part of his team, and those who don't look after their comrades were lower than trash. Damn it! Naruto roared as he completed his blow, sending the older ninja flying to the ground in a spray of blood. What happened to your intensity? Haku asked as he pulled himself to his feet. You can't finish me off acting like this. Naruto winced. As badly as he wanted to avenge Sasuke, that's exactly where he didn't want to go. He didn't want to have to kill, especially not a helpless foe. He couldn't help but remember the words the other boy had told him in the forest. Do you have an important person? I want to protect my important person, to help his dreams come true. That is my dream. He didn't want to do this. Seeing his hesitation, Haku slowly wiped the blood off of his chin. There are people who make this mistake, not killing their enemies because of pity, just letting them leave with just their lives. Can't you understand? Haku asked, looking Naruto in the eyes. Not having a dream? Not being needed by anyone? The pain of living without a purpose? To give up your life so easily? What was Haku going on about? What are you trying to say? Zabuza has no need for a weak ninja. You have taken my reason for existing, he replied honestly. Naruto winced as his mind once again turned back to their conversation in the woods. When a person has something precious to protect, that is when they can truly become strong. Naruto quaked with rage and screamed at the indignity of it. Why? He asked. Why for a guy like that? He's a bad guy who takes money from criminals. Is that eyebrowless freak the only person important to you? Haku took a deep breath and looked Naruto in the eyes. I had people very dear to me long ago. He paused. Parents. I was born in a small, snowy village in the country of water. I was happy. My parents were very kind people. He sighed sadly. But when I grew up and began to learn the ways of the world, something happened. Haku trailed off, leaving the statement floating. Something? Naruto asked in confusion. What? My blood, Haku all but whispered in response. Blood? Naruto asked again, still confused about where Haku was going. Haku looked down in sadness. To see that kind of look on such a pretty face was a depressing thing. So Naruto asked softly, what happened? Haku looked back up to him. My father killed my mother, and then he tried to kill me. What? Naruto gasped. The water country had been going through an endless civil war, and those with advanced bloodlines came to be hated. Advanced bloodlines? Naruto repeated. Bloodlines with special abilities like mine, he clarified. Because of these abilities, clans with bloodline limits such as mine were used as weapons in countless battles. As a result, these clans were held responsible for bringing war and misfortune to the country. Naruto froze as he remembered Sasuke's words. To resurrect my clan and kill a certain man. Oh yeah, he remembered something about Sasuke having a limit too, though honestly he never paid much attention when people brought the bastard up. My mother carried one of those bloodlines, Haku continued. My father found out and he killed her, and when he came for me, I was frightened and I reacted. He paused. I destroyed him with my power. Naruto grimaced. Okay, now this was just fucked up. It was then that I thought about myself and had no choice but to realize the most painful thing possible. Most painful thing possible? Naruto wondered. What could be worse than having to kill your father after he killed your mom? That in the whole of the world, no one single person cared about me. I was a completely unwanted person. Naruto gasped. They were one and the same. You said you wanted to become the best ninja in your village and have everyone acknowledge your worth. Now, if someone who acknowledged you from the bottom of their heart appeared, wouldn't that someone become the most important person in the world to you? Naruto lowered his head as Iruka-sensei's face ran through his mind. Haku was right. He loved Iruka-sensei more than anyone in the world. Zabuza-san took me in knowing I had a bloodline limit. This blood that everyone else hated, he desired it. Haku smiled as a tear ran down his cheek. I was wanted. I was so happy. Haku took a deep breath, looking lost in thought before looking back to Naruto. Naruto-kun, please kill me. There weren't words to express how much Naruto didn't want to do that. While he wanted to avenge Sasuke, he didn't want to kill Haku. He couldn't let Sasuke's death go unavenged. But he didn't want to kill anyone, especially someone who could understand all he'd gone through. Why are you hesitating? Haku asked him. Please hurry up and kill me, Naruto growled as his own frustrations over this damnable decision came to the surface. I don't understand. He roared. Is being strong the only reason you have to live? He took a deep breath. Something other than fighting. You could have been acknowledged for something else. That day I met you in the forest, I knew you were like me. You should be able to understand. Haku sighed. I'm sorry that you will have to stain your hands, Naruto sighed. He couldn't understand why Haku was so hellbent on death. Is this, he sighed, is this the only way? Haku nodded. Yes. Naruto took a deep breath and steeled his nerves. He didn't want to do this, but he could understand. If he'd lost his opportunity to become a ninja, to become Hokage, he'd probably be saying the same thing. He didn't want to live without his dream, but while he thought it was a waste, he wasn't going to force Haku to live without his. If the boy would rather die than be a failure to Zabuza, well, so be it. Haku smiled as Naruto do one of his kunai. Please fulfill your own dreams. Naruto frowned and looked back to Sasuke. He also had a dream. Naruto took a deep breath. If we met under different circumstances, we might have become friends. For a moment Naruto considered charging the other boy, but he decided against it. It was bad enough that he was going to kill. He didn't want to feel the sickening feeling of his blade cutting through flesh. Thank you, Haku said as Naruto drew his hand back to throw the blade. Taking a deep breath, Naruto released the blade. While he normally wasn't the best shot in the academy, you'd have to be a real screw-up to miss a stationary target. As the blade approached, Haku's eyes opened wide, and he deflected the kunai saying, I'm sorry Naruto-kun, but I can't die yet. Naruto was filled with a flash of anger, as the other boy began to form seals to pull off some kind of jutsu. It didn't work like that. You can't just say kill me then go time out. Where was Sasuke's fucking time out? With a burst of chakra, Naruto closed the distance between the two a split second. With a roar of fury, Naruto punched Haku in the stomach with a furious uppercut. The force of the blows sent Haku flying into the air. Naruto growled and pulled back as the other boy hit the ground. Pitifully, Haku rolled over and began to vomit up blood, with his killing intent clearly visible on his face. Naruto walked over and kicked Haku in the side hard enough to send him sprawling. There are no timeouts. Naruto roared. You're either dead or you're not. You can't just demand that I kill you and then say hold on a second. No, Haku whispered. It can't be, Naruto sneered. What, now you want to live? No, Haku whimpered as he unsteadily rose to his feet. The look on his face was desperate and frantic. Please no, Naruto backed off. Okay, what the hell? First Haku was going on and on about how life without your dream was meaningless, and now he wanted to live so badly? Naruto blinked in confusion as Haku pushed past him, holding his stomach as he lumbered into the vanishing mists. Taking a deep breath, he followed him wondering what the hell was going on. It was then that he saw it. Sasuke's death had been tragic, but it had been clean and probably painless. This on the other hand was, well, either. Across the bridge Kakashi-sensei was standing across from Zabuza, his arm buried up to his elbow in the Nukanin's chest. Naruto fought back bile at the revolting sight while Haku released a deafening, girlish scream. Glancing over, Kakashi simply withdrew his arm from his foe's body. Once again, Naruto fought the urge to vomit as he heard the sickening suction sound and saw all that blood come rushing out of the large hole in his torso. Yeah, Zabuza sure as hell wasn't getting back up this time. Zabuza-san! Haku cried out as he stumbled towards the body. For the first time Naruto heard true anguish in his voice. I failed you. I was weak. It should have been me. It should have been me. The dying Nukanin smiled under his mask and weakly brought his hand up to touch Haku's cheek as the boy collapsed to his knees next to him. No, Haku, you were a powerful instrument, but sometimes that's just not enough. But I failed. No. Don't blame yourself, Haku. We're ninja. Death can come for us any time, and today it was mine. He choked. Haku, I have one last command for you. Anything. He exclaimed as he grabbed the other ninja's hand. I'm already dead. It would be pointless for you to die for me now. He coughed again, his mask slowly turning red from his own blood. Find your own dream, or find someone worthy and serve them as you served me. I will, Haku whispered. He smiled under his mask. Good. You were like a child to me, Haku. Everything I had I now leave to you. Goodbye, Haku. Zabuza said nothing else. He simply closed his eyes and let himself go. Haku screamed in torment before hugging the body closely, tears streaming down his face. Naruto watched sadly until Kakashi placed his hand, the one that wasn't covered in gore, thank the kami, on his shoulder. Give him some space. It's not easy losing someone close. Naruto looked up to his teacher sadly. Sasuke, Naruto looked down. He's dead. What? Kakashi whispered. The Jonin's hand tightened and he glared at the crying boy for a moment, radiating pure killer intent before he sighed and looked at Naruto with sadness in his one visible eye. Then I guess this was a bad day for everyone. Speak for yourself, ninja. All eyes turned to see Gato standing at the end of the bridge clapping his hands with a small army of thugs standing behind him. I must say things went off far better than I could have possibly imagined. Zabuza has worn you all down wonderfully and had the decency to die by your hands and save me the trouble. I must say this day couldn't be any better. What? Haku exclaimed as he pulled himself to his feet. I never intended to pay you, silly boy. Gato laughed. He was nothing more than a tool. He was useful for a time, but when that time is up you simply dispose of the tool and get a new one. That is why new Nin are so much more useful than village ninja. No one minds when you throw them out. Haku seethed in rage. Zabuza-san was not a tool. He had a dream. Gato scoffed, cutting him off. I don't care about the worthless dreams of a worthless man, With a growl of fury, Haku flicked his wrist and silenced Gato permanently. The short crime lord fell backwards with his mouth open in mid-sentence, a senbon piercing the weak flesh of his throat, embedded in the fat man's brain stem, killing him instantly. You will not make light of Zabuza-san's memory. Hey! Exclaimed one of the thugs. You killed our meal ticket. Yeah, added another, you guys are dead. We're gonna pillage this town and take everything of value. Just remember, lads, rape, pillage, then burn. Make sure not to mix it up. Haku looked at the opposing force with steel in his eyes and drew his senbon. The temperature began to drop and snow began to fall from the sky. A severe wind blew across the bridge, chilling everyone to the bone. Haku fell into a fighting stance and glared at the enemy. But just a moment later the temperature returned to normal, the snow stopped, and Haku fell backwards, only just being caught by Naruto as his needles jingled across the ground. Naruto-kun, I am sorry, but it appears that I no longer have the strength to fight, he smiled at Naruto. And there is no need for you to grieve. Your friend is alive. The technique I used only gives the appearance of death. He began to fade but then shook his head and looked Naruto dead in the eyes. You have the strength I didn't have, Naruto-kun. Fight, Naruto, protect your precious people and make them acknowledge you. Haku said nothing more because he'd fallen asleep in Naruto's arms. Glancing over his shoulder he saw Sakura holding Sasuke. The bastard was out of the fight but he sure as hell wasn't dead. Naruto smiled and slowly he lowered the other bai to the ground. Sasuke was alive, he hadn't had to kill Haku, and he was right. All that stood between him and his acknowledgement was this army of cutthroats and murders. Naruto smirked as he felt his second wind come on. He almost pitied the poor bastards. Almost. Taiju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 1. Kakashi took a deep breath as he entered Tsuna's house. Thank the kami. He hadn't missed dinner. While he enjoyed the benefits of rank, he really hated getting stuck with all the damned paperwork. Just to make matters worse he had to spend several hours putting up with the local constabulary while they dealt with the bandits. After that was all done and over with he picked up his little care package and called it a night. Despite all the after-action bullshit, today had been very interesting to say the least. He'd defeated a damn near legendary Nin. It seemed as if a member of a powerful lost bloodline was probably returning with them to Koha, and Naruto defeated an entire army of bandits with only a minimal amount of assistance. Around the table all three of his genin were sitting with Tsuna's family. He'd have to ask where that ice kid, Haku, had run off to. From the look of things, Naruto was very close to abusing their hospitality. What, considering the massive pile of rice bowls sitting beside him. That said, Kakashi couldn't care less. The fact remained that Tsuna had knowingly listed a Class A bodyguard mission as a Class C escort mission. Taking that into account, well, the kid could abuse their hospitality all he damned well pleased. Besides, after saving the daughter and grandkid from a kidnapping attempt, defeating an enemy Nin with a powerful bloodline, then following it up by running off a horde of bandits with a veritable clone army, the kid could probably use the meal. Kakashi chuckled. That idiot old man was lucky that he didn't work his charms on his pretty little daughter and find a little bit of Ike paradise of his own. Looking back to the table, he couldn't help but shake his head. Naruto. He hadn't been too impressed by the boy at first, but damn, he really was his father's son. He knew that the kid knew the Kage Bunshin, but he hadn't expected him to be able to summon several hundred of the damn things. He barely had to lift a finger. The kid just swarmed forward, stomped the crap out of the bandits through sheer weight of numbers. When the townspeople had shown up ready to defend their homes from the hired marauders, they hadn't needed to do much more than mop up. He sighed and looked at the bag in his hand. That was why he'd gone out. He was also proud of Sasuke. While he hadn't performed as well as Naruto in the battle, he had shown that he was willing to give everything he had, even his life, to protect his teammates. He'd also managed to unlock his Sharingan, which in itself was no small accomplishment. Having the ability himself, Kakashi knew that the boy's skill would increase exponentially from here on out. Sakura had mastered tree climbing first, without a doubt had the best chakra control, and had defended the old man as ordered. But when compared to the accomplishments of his other students, her performance was depressingly underwhelming. Next time he'd have to make sure to get her a chance to show her stuff. He also had to admit that while he was still angry at the boy, Haku was highly capable. He'd managed to dominate both the last Uchiha and the son of the Yondaime Hokage, with it only being Naruto's use of the Kyuubi no Kitsune's chakra that allowed him to wear the older boy down and defeat him through sheer brute force. Kid was also a decent mednin. Once he'd regained consciousness, he'd immediately volunteered to take care of everyone's wounds. He hadn't used any jutsu, but considering his state of near-total chakra exhaustion, that wasn't very surprising. Naruto-kun, Kakashi said, we need to talk for a moment. The boy nodded and stood up, a wide smile on his face. Yeah, Kakashi-sensei? Where's Haku? Kakashi asked. He hoped the boy hadn't run off. If they could convince the boy to come to Konoha, he'd bring both the hidden mist techniques he'd learned from Zabuza and his powerful bloodline limit with him. Oh, he's taking a bath, Naruto replied. Kakashi nodded. That was understandable. From the sound of things, Naruto had used the kid as a punching bag. A hot bath always helped soothe bruising. Looking back to the boy, he said, Naruto, walk with me? Yes, sensei. Kakashi walked the two of them out of earshot of the others and turned to him. I just got back from the Constabulary. Naruto blinked in confusion. Okay. Kakashi placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. Here comes the hard part, the part that more than any separates the ninja from the nobodies. Naruto, I believe that you should know, 12 of the bandits you fought didn't survive the battle. Kakashi decided not to mention the other 30 not expected to survive the night. Kid had enough to think about. Besides, they were going to hang the lot of them in the morning, so it wasn't like it actually mattered. The boy sucked in a deep breath and lowered his head, his normally cheerful demeanor vanishing in an instant. Your first kill is always the hardest, and to make matters worse, it was the rare ninja whose first kill was actually his first dozen. So you didn't realize? He asked. Naruto shook his head. I was trying not to kill anyone, but when you're dealing with a large, dense group of enemies, you don't have time to watch your blows and it's easy to get lost in the fog of battle. Naruto simply nodded. How do you feel, Naruto? The boy paused and looked back up to him. His eyes were sad, but they were determined. I'm sorry that they're dead, but they wanted to kill my friends and destroy the city. He paused. That's why I became a ninja, to protect people. Kakashi smiled under his mask and gave the boy's shoulder a squeeze. You passed the final test, Naruto. Naruto blinked. What? I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times in the academy that we ninja deal in death, but most people don't understand it until they've actually been forced to take a life. Some can't handle the responsibility, but you can. Now you're a true Konoha shinobi. The boy smiled sadly. Thank you, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi slowly lifted the bag in his hand and gave it to Naruto. Now, I'm sorry that this isn't the best quality, but it's the best I could find around here. Naruto blinked as he pulled the bottle of mid-grade sake from the bag. Sake? Kakashi nodded. Yeah. I've found that sometimes the only thing you can do is accept that you can't change the past and forget your worries with a good, stiff drink. What he didn't mention was that if the alcohol didn't make you forget, the hangover in the morning would. Naruto looked down at the bottle and nodded. I think I'll go take a bath. Maybe Haku could use a drink too. Kakashi laughed. That's the spirit, kid. You'd be surprised how many lifelong friendships start drunk and miserable. Naruto rolled his eyes and walked off holding the bottle. Kakashi smiled and crossed his arms proudly. Kid was going to do just fine. Minato-sensei, you'd be proud. 1. Naruto sighed as he threw his clothes into the basket beside Haku's. He was tired and felt a bit depressed. He hadn't meant to kill those guys, but it wasn't like he had too much of a choice. They were going to kill his precious people, then do unspeakable things to the innocent people in the town. Wasn't that why he wanted to become Hokage? Not just so people would acknowledge him, but so he could protect everyone and prove himself. He never expected to become Hokage without having to hurt, having to kill anyone, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon. He sighed and pulled the top off the bottle Kakashi-sensei gave him. At least it hadn't been Haku. While he could accept killing an enemy who wanted to hurt his friends or innocent people in battle, killing someone who wasn't even fighting back was a bit hard for him to stomach. It felt too much like murder. With a sigh, Naruto took a deep drag of the bottle and winced as it burned like fire going down. He had a feeling that most first-time drinkers would have probably been unable to deal with the sensation without spitting out the first mouthful, but for someone who was used to drinking his milk extra chunky, it wasn't much of a problem. If you could keep that down, cheap sake was hardly a problem. Naruto opened the door, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath to savor the steam. Nothing clears the nasal passages like steam, though after that first swig, he had to admit that strong alcohol came in a close second. He opened his eyes in curiosity as he heard a splash, which drew him out of his moment of revelry. Haku was sitting on the far end of the bath, neck deep in water. There was a slight flush on his face which made Naruto wonder if the other boy had been in the water a bit too long. Hey! Naruto said a bit more chipper than he'd intended. He laughed inside. Maybe it was already starting to work. Absently, Naruto grabbed a bucket of cold water and sighed. He always hated his part. Fighting back a curse, he dumped it over his head and began to scrub as quickly as possible. He always hated cold water. This was double true since that time when he was 10 that water got shut off in the middle of winter. Now that had really sucked. He was just lucky he never got sick because he'd had to bathe and wash his clothes in the river. Still, as a result, he had no love of cold water. Naruto-kun, Haku said carefully, I didn't expect you to take a bath so soon. Naruto shrugged, fighting back a shiver as he scrubbed himself clean as quickly as possible. After today I felt like one would be a good idea. Know what I mean? Besides, we're both guys so it's not like we'll see anything we haven't seen before. Right, Haku said slowly, we're both guys here. After a moment Naruto judged himself clean enough, and dumped another bucket over his head to rinse off. Yeah. That would do. He stood up and took another swig of sake. You know, this stiff wasn't so bad once you got used to it. With a deep sigh of contentment, he settled into the water across from Haku. After all the fighting he'd done today, the bath was heavenly. Even with his quick recovery time, he still felt like an overworked pincushion, but a nice hot bath would make everything right with the world. Naruto, where did you get that bottle? Haku asked, warily looking at the aforementioned hooch. Found out some bad news, Naruto replied. I killed some of those guys on the bridge. Kakashi-sensei gave it to me, said it might help. He paused and glanced over at the other boy before holding it out to him. Here, Haku frowned. Zabuza-san told me that getting drunk makes you vulnerable and that ninja cannot afford such weakness. The boy paused and lowered his head, sadly sinking even deeper into the water at the mention of his late precious person. Naruto smiled to the other boy and held the bottle out again. Kakashi-sensei said that sometimes the only thing you can do is accept that you can't change the past, and sometimes a good, stiff drink will help you forget about your worries for a while. The other boy paused for a moment before snatching the bottle out of Naruto's hand and drinking with a gusto that made Naruto wonder if he was going to get it back. Absently he also noted how dainty and delicate the other boy's arms were. While they'd look pretty on a girl, on a guy they were just downright creepy. Hey! I'll share it, but you can't have the whole thing, Naruto exclaimed as he snatched the bottle back. Haku simply glared in response. Naruto wilted under the dirty look and lowered his head. You probably hate us, do you? No, Haku replied. You did your duty as ninja. There could never have been any other way. While your sensei struck the killing blow, and you prevented me from giving my life in place of his, it was Gato's dishonorable intentions that caused his death, and he's already paid for his disrespect. Naruto nodded and took another swig. Yeah. I guess so. So what are you going to do now? Haku paused for a moment, then snatched the bottle back, a sad look on his face. I have no idea. He took another long swig. Once again I am an unwanted person. Hey! Naruto exclaimed, snatching the bottle back. You aren't an unwanted person, Haku growled and leaned forward, locking eyes with Naruto. My precious person is dead. He's the only person who gave a damn about me in the world, and now he's gone. No one else cares if I live or die. Naruto took another dose of liquid courage and glared at the other boy. That's not true. I care. I don't care if you were my enemy, and I'm glad you're not dead, because now we can become friends. Haku blinked. Friends? Yeah, Naruto exclaimed. Friends. I have lots of friends. Hinata-chan, Sakura-chan, Konohamaru-kun, Iruka-sensei, Hokage Ojisama, the Ikarakus, hell, even Sasuke, though he's a. Haku smiled thinly and took the bottle back, taking a thin sip. Then you are most fortunate, Naruto-kun, to have so many people who acknowledge you. Naruto snatched the bottle back and looked Haku in the eyes. Yeah, I know, and if you gave him half a chance I bet they'd become your friends, you too. Haku's features softened. Are you serious? Naruto nodded with a grin on his face. Serious as a bowl of ramen. Haku blinked. How is a bowl of ramen serious? You seriously better not get in between me and it, because you might get hurt. Haku laughed and took the bottle back. So you really want to be my friend? Really? Honestly? Yeah, I say what I mean and I mean what I say. Haku took a sip and nodded. Thank you, Naruto. He paused. You said your dream was to become Hokage, right? To protect everyone in your village and make them acknowledge your strength? Naruto nodded. Yep. Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage and protector of the village that's supposed to be hidden in the leaves, but is really just sitting in the middle of a big damn forest with lots of roads running in all directions. Haku smiled. You are a very special person, Naruto-kun. Zabuza told me to find a worthy person and help them find their dream. I'd like to help you find yours. Well, not find, cause you already found it, but to achieve it. Naruto beamed. Thanks, Haku. Let's go train. He tried to stand, but his footing was questionable and his balance was unsure, causing him to fall back into the bathtub. Haku giggled in a girlish manner and offered the bottle back to him. I think you're drunk. Naruto nodded. Yeah. He took another swig. I drink so too. Haku laughed. Don't you mean I think so? Naruto shrugged. That's what I said. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Haku laughed again. You've a very strange boy, you know that, Naruto-kun? Hey, who are you calling strange? Naruto mock glared. You're one to talk, girly boy. I'm not a girly boy. Haku frowned, still neck deep in water, as he tried to reach out for the bottle. Give me that. Kakashi-sensei gave it to me, Naruto snorted. And you are too a girly boy. I am not a girly boy. Haku exclaimed again. You are too. You're girly, so you're a girly boy. I'm girly because I'm a girl. Haku growled. Now gimme that bottle. Don't expect me to fall for that one again, Haku, but I really am a girl. Are not? Naruto exclaimed. I am too. Haku countered. Are not? I am too. Naruto grinned. I am too. Are not? Haku paused in surprise as Naruto laughed. See, even you agree with me. I really am a girl. Haku protested. Naruto laughed. Yeah. Prove it and I'll even give you the bottle back. You asked for it. Haku sneered before standing up. Naruto's eyes almost burst from his head as he took in Haku's definitely 100% female, water-glistening, naked form. As the creator of the Oiroku no Jutsu, Naruto liked to see himself as a bit of an expert in female anatomy, and the anatomy before him was very, very female. Suddenly he realized that he'd spent the past, who knows how long, sitting in a bath with a hot older girl getting sloshed, and after much careful internal debate, he eloquently managed to put his thoughts into words. How the hell did you hide those? Naruto exclaimed as he stared at a pair of rosy-capped breasts that were half the size of his head and seemed to redefine the word perky. Loose, heavy shirts and a minor genjutsu seal woven into my breast bindings. Sealing is truly a powerful art, he breathed in awe. Haku glowered. So I've noticed, now gimme that bottle. Haku lunged for the bottle, but like Naruto, her normally exceptional sense of balance had been disrupted by the sake, and she ended up slipping forward and fell on top of the younger male. Naruto gagged as he dropped the sake bottle to the side, letting what little liquid remained within run out onto the tiles. But all was forgotten as he felt the warm and inviting feeling of Haku's body pressed against his. With his inhibitions in a state of glorious absence, he did the only thing natural. He kissed her. Also being inebriated state, Haku showed her appreciation for the idea by returning it with a desperate fervor. Both of them swept away in sensations they'd never felt before. 1. Sasuke groaned as he threw his shirt into the clothes basket. He felt like hell. He didn't think there was a single part of his body that hadn't been filled with needles, and his nerves were still throbbing thanks to the death-faking paralysis technique. If being dead felt anything like what Haku had done to him, he was half tempted to forget about his brother and go looking for immortality because that had really sucked, though maybe he could do both. After all, Itachi would be screwed in a fight against someone who couldn't die. He chuckled to himself in amusement. That would be cool, but it was also highly unrealistic. He had to keep his head straight about this one. He already knew what he had to do. He had to unlock the full power of his Sharingan. Only then would he be strong enough to defeat that man and avenge his clan. Of course you couldn't avenge anyone if you were dead, so he had to wonder why he'd taken that hit for the dough. It just made no sense. He'd just seen it coming and reacted on instinct. Did this mean that Naruto was his best friend? Did that mean he had to kill Naruto in order to become strong enough to kill his brother? He shook his head. That wouldn't be easy. While Naruto wasn't quite as pathetic as he looked, for some reason Sasuke had doubts to his own ability to kill the other boy. Was it because of the hidden power within him, or was it something else, like his own deep-rooted unwillingness to kill the idiot? Moving his mind to another subject, he was glad that Haku Kid was still alive. While he was still pissed about almost being killed, he was smart enough not to take it too personally. Besides, while he wasn't able to duplicate the other boy's bloodline-based abilities, much of his combat prowess seemed to be due to his unique form of Taijutsu. He hoped he'd stay around for a while because he had no doubt that once he'd watched the other boy for long enough, he'd be able to duplicate it. Now, while he doubted it would make him powerful enough to defeat Itachi, he knew that it could at least give him a few tricks that man wouldn't be expecting. Yeah. He'd definitely have to talk to the other boy about sparring so he could learn some of his techniques. With a smile, Sasuke opened the door. That expression was instantly replaced by wide-eyed, open-mouthed shock. Naruto and Haku were in the bath, and they were making out. There were two guys making out in the bath. That girly boy he could expect. After all, for a man to be that girly he had to be a little impressed by nature. But Naruto? That didn't make any sense, he gasped. Or did it? Suddenly it all made sense, the kind of sense that made Sasuke's blood freeze in his veins. Naruto was gay. Naruto liked him. That accidental kiss, it wasn't so accidental. The reason he stalked Sakura. It wasn't because he liked the pink-haired girl, it was because she liked Sasuke and he tolerated her. Naruto was using Sakura to get close to him. Their entire rivalry, it was because the dead last loser just wanted to be close to him. Hell, he bet the twisted little freak got off every time he hit him in a sparring match. A chill went up his spine as he remembered that they'd bathed together several times over the duration of this mission. He felt dirty, he felt defiled, he felt a deep concern for his anal virginity. Almost hyperventilating, Sasuke stumbled back and gripped the door to steady himself. He almost cursed as the door rattled, doubtlessly bringing the attention of both the queers in the bathtub upon him. Sasuke gulped as he filled with fear. He'd been hoping to simply slip away, but now that they were busted, what would they do? Would they hold him down and do unspeakably gay things to him in order to force his silence with shame, or would they just accept that the cat is out of the bag and come clean? Honestly, he didn't intend to be around to find out. Sasuke turned around and slid the door shut as fast as it would go and grabbed a yukata off a hook. Taking only enough time to cover himself, he ran for help like his ass depended on it, because it just might. Kakashi-sensei. 1. Kakashi sighed as he placed his chopsticks back onto the table and turned to his uncharacteristically frantic, and apparently naked, genin. On one hand he was annoyed, after all, he just managed to sit down to enjoy a very well-deserved meal. On the other he was wondering what in the world could make the otherwise implacable Uchiha Sasuke freak out this badly. He was also amused. His other genin was blushing brightly, virtually paralyzed with shock, while a small trickle of blood made its way down her left nostril. Oh yeah? He had no idea what was going on, but they were never going to live this down. He'd make sure of it. What is it, Sasuke, and why are you running around without pants? Kakashi asked bluntly. Haku and Naruto are in the bath together, he exclaimed, jumping around in place. Behind Kakashi, Sakura fell over backwards, in a near catatonic state, a silly grin pasted across her features, and the blood from her nose now flowing freely. All of Sasuke's jumping around must have given her a look at his junk. He looked over and shook his head. Girl had it bad. Well, that or she was into yaoi. Personally, Kakashi hoped it was the former. Looking back to Sasuke, he suddenly wondered what was wrong with the kid. Communal bathing was in no way something to freak out about. It was a proud part of their culture, after all. Was he really that sheltered? Hell, hadn't he shared a bath with Naruto already? Okay, what was he leaving out? And how exactly is this an excuse for you running around making a fool of yourself? Kakashi asked bluntly. They were making out, Sasuke exclaimed. Kakashi jumped to his feet. Okay. What the fuck? While he didn't disbelieve Sasuke, he knew something had to be up. He'd given Naruto that booze, and the kid said he'd be sharing it with Haku, so maybe they were both drunk, maybe experimenting. A lot of guys did that, though most never spoke of it. Hell, maybe Haku actually was a girl who tried to pass as a guy. A lot of girls did it, and he didn't think a guy could be that pretty. Hell, maybe the Uchiha had just seen something that just looked kinda queer, made the wrong assumption, and let his mind fill in all the blanks, coming to a worst-case scenario. Not that there was anything innately wrong with being gay, but with the way Naruto stalled Sakura, and that wondrous Oiroke no jutsus of his, it didn't seem likely. Besides, the son of Namikaze Minato, the man who gave him his first volume of Ichi Ichi Paradise, gay? On that day he'd eat his own mask. Come on, Kakashi said in annoyance. Let's see what's going on. It's obvious what's going on, sensei, Sasuke replied. Naruto's gay and he's using his membership in this team to try and get a piece of my ass. Well, I'm not going to stand for it. I like girls, damn it. Kakashi simply glanced at the boy and smirked. Do I mess with his head, or don't I? Kakashi smiled under his mask. Do. With the way you ignore Sakura, I have my doubts, kiddo. Sasuke flushed brightly and glared at his sensei. I have a man to kill, I cannot afford any distractions. Your clan isn't going to rebuild itself, you know, Kakashi replied, honestly enjoying yanking on the kid's chain. Sasuke frowned. I can do that after I've avenged my clan, Kakashi shrugged. And here I thought you'd want to rebuild your clan first, if only to make sure that if something happened to you, your lineage isn't lost. Sasuke turned about glaring him in the eye. He paused. You have a point, and that's why I'm the Jonin instructor, and you're the Genin student. Sasuke blushed and lowered his head. Well, for once he got the little genius to back down. Big shocker that. With a smile under his mask, Kakashi slid open the door to the furo and walked in. Walking past the baskets of clothing, his highly trained senses spotted a flash of color among Haku's clothing. Aha! He knew it. Suddenly things fell into place, and he couldn't help but smile. Oh, this was going to be so fun. With a flourish, he opened the inner door and stepped inside. Naruto was well on his way to third base with Haku, who, if those luscious breasts that Naruto was groping were any indication, was most definitely of the female persuasion. He had to admit that the girl was pretty hot, and he was half tempted to let the boy have his fun, but it was his duty as Naruto's instructor to humiliate him at every opportunity. Besides, he wanted to take a bath too, and he wasn't going to clean the damn thing out after two people screwed it in. Sasuke, that's a girl, he said loudly, in his best kindergarten teacher voice, attracting the attention of the two drunken kids in the tub. Naruto just sat dumbfounded in place while Haku eked and ducked under the water to preserve what little feminine modesty she had already thrown to the wind. See? Kakashi continued, in his lecture voice. Those are boobies. Only girls have boobies. Boobies, can you say boobies? I know that you can. He looked at Sasuke expectantly. Sasuke flushed and averting his eyes, growled out, boobies. Good boy. Kakashi exclaimed as if he were praising a small child. Now, apologize for telling everyone Naruto was making out with a guy. Sasuke stood in place with a furious blush on his face, and then after a long moment, muttered out a very sad sorry. Kakashi frowned. That'll do. Now what lesson have you learned today, student? Sasuke sighed. Never base a conclusion off of assumed truths. Always confirm your information. Kakashi nodded proudly. Very good. You may go. To his great amusement, Sasuke bolted out the door like someone had lit his ass on fire, Turning back to Naruto, he crossed his arms. Other people need to use this bath, and I'm not going to clean it after you've had your fun. Out of the tub, both of you! Naruto slowly and unsure climbed out, with a look on his face like someone had just strangled his puppy, which considering where Haku's hands had been, she just might have been doing. Haku on the other hand stayed crouched and glared at him. Once you leave, pervert, she snapped. She didn't want to flash him. Fair enough. As Naruto walked to the door, Kakashi patted him on the back with one hand, winked and gave him a thumbs up with the other. Making out with the hot older girl in the tub, eh? I have to give you at least 100 man points for this one, kid. Chapter 2, Good Morning World. Haku groaned in agony as she opened her eyes. The light was blinding and it felt like her eyes were being burned out of their sockets. If there was a hell, it must be a hangover, because she could easily see this as a punishment for all her life's sins, both real and imagined. Slowly, wearily, she turned over and attempted to pull her pillow over her head to make it stop. She just wanted to go back to sleep and pretend the day before was just some horrible nightmare. Unfortunately, she was already conscious and getting more and more awake as the seconds passed. Pity that, she hurt. There was no other way to describe it. There was no part of her body that didn't ache. From her head to her toes she felt like she'd been beaten with clubs. While he'd only struck her a couple times, Naruto's strength had been truly monstrous, and her landings far from graceful. Her hangover was a form of unpleasantness she'd never before experienced, and she hoped never to do so again. Her chakra exhaustion left her feeling like her body was made of lead. While not unknown to her, chakra exhaustion was something she rarely experienced. Her techniques were too powerful and her reserves too deep. It was rare for her to ever get pushed that far. The worst, though, was the pain in her heart. She would never be able to forget what happened on that bridge. Thanks to her weariness, fatigue, and hangover, her recall was not what it should be. To her the battle registered as a chaotic mass of memories of melancholy, pain, loss, and rage. In quick succession she'd lost her dream, her father, and her innocence. While she'd killed before, it had never been intentional. She'd never taken any pleasure in the idea of killing, and had always avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. She hated seeing people suffer needlessly. She shook her head. Ironic, considering that she was formerly the tool of the Demon of the Mist, who was famed for using carnage as a weapon. She'd enjoyed killing Gato. This disgusted her, but at the same time, she found it very hard to care. The man deserved it. He was a vile creature whose duplicity and selfishness had led to Zabuza-san's death. While he hadn't delivered the killing blow, this entire ordeal was his responsibility. Satisfaction was to be expected. Killing him had simply been the act of avenging her master. She paused. No. Not master. Her father. Before he died, Zabuza had called her his child. He'd said she was to inherit all he had. In that act he'd given her the most precious of gifts. He'd made her more than an extension of his will. He'd declared to her that she was his precious person. He loved her. She was his daughter, his apprentice, no longer his tool. Even in her pain this brought her comfort. For that brief moment, she saw the love in his eyes and it filled a void she never knew existed. For that moment he valued her for her, and not for her blood. In that moment, she'd gone beyond being wanted to being cherished. A small smile came to her face and she hugged herself, desperately trying to hold on to that precious moment of love. Haku blinked as she felt a squishy sensation under her robe. She looked down and saw that her breasts unbound, covered only by a thin yukata that only just managed to preserve her feminine modesty. Her eyes went wide. Oh shit, what had she done? If there was one thing that Zabuza had grilled into her with almost obsessive intensity, it was that her true gender was to be kept secret. Under no circumstances could the fact that she was actually female could end up in the bingo books. The reason was entirely defensive. It was an unspoken fact that many hunter-nin abused the amount of freedom that the nature of their profession allowed them to indulge in otherwise unspeakable acts of cruelty and sadism. Among other things, many, especially those from were free to take certain liberties with the kunoichi they were hunting before they killed them. In fact, it was considered an unspoken but universally accepted job perk among the hunter-nin of Kirigakure no Sato, and the behavior actually given the silently approval of the current Mizuki. The price of defeat for a ninja was death. She knew this, she accepted this, and she knew well that the only reason she was alive now was due to the mercy of these Konoha-nin. It was simply the way of things. But that? She shuddered. It made her blood run colder than the ice she so casually manipulated. To her it was the stuff of nightmares. That was why she hid her gender. If hiding her gender was the price to pay to avoid a slow, agonal, degrading end, it was one well paid. There was no way that this was going to be kept out of Konoha's bingo books now, and once it was in their bingo books, everyone would copy it. Even worse, without Zabuza's reputation to shield her, she had no idea that Kiri would step up their attempts. Her existence wasn't widely known outside of Kirigakure no Sato due to the fact that up until this point she'd spent her life living in Zabuza's shadow. Protected by his reputation and tendency not to leave survivors, she was on her own now, and once Konoha listed her, all bets were off. She felt disgusted at her own foolishness. How could she have been so stupid? She took a deep breath and tried to remember. What could have caused her to lose complete control of her senses so badly? She paused. Okay, that was a rhetorical question. The hangover made it obviously that she'd gotten drunk and done something idiotic. The question was what had she done, and how she'd gotten to this point to begin with. She sat up and, ignoring her pain in order to try and think. She remembered passing out due to chakra exhaustion. After that, not so much. Her head hurt too badly, and just sitting up felt like a complicated task. While she never drank to excess before, and Zabuza considered it a weakness, Gozu and Meizu loved nothing more than getting themselves drunk to the point of stupidity, finding a couple of local harlots, and dragging themselves home the next morning in a pitiful state. While she never took any pleasure in the suffering of others, she'd always thought it served them right. But now, for the first time, she actually felt a bit of empathy for the discomfort those two morons had been in. Taking a deep breath, she looked about the room, ignoring the nauseating spinning sensation, and seeing her clothing folded next to her futon, fumbled in the pile checking to see if she had any samban. As she'd expected, most of the ones in her clothing were gone. After all, it is not a very bright ninja who leaves a potential enemy with weapons, even if they were no longer an open threat. Unfortunately for her though, they were rather thorough in the search. Like any kunoichi worth the title, she had her own little hindering places for weapons in case she was captured to aid her in any potential escapes, but they'd all be checked. Kakashi. She sighed. Few genin could be this thorough. It was the mark of a professional. Gritting her teeth to off the pain of her hangover, she summoned her power and formed several ice samban. Without pause, she pressed them into several acupuncture points. Within seconds her screaming migraine reduced itself to a dull but persistent headache. While it wasn't a perfect solution, it did reduce her headache enough for her to be able to think clearly. Taking a deep breath, she focused. She remembered waking up in the bridge builder's house after the battle. She remembered tending the Konohanin's wounds and eating dinner with them. Then she decided to take a bath, then dash. She blushed. Then Naruto had walked in, and in order to conceal her gender she hid most of her body under the water. He sat across from her, and they started to talk. He'd shared his sake with her, which explained how she'd gotten drunk. That's where everything began to fade. She crossed her legs and concentrated, ignoring her body's protest. After that, she smiled. After that she'd opened up to him. She told her that she was alone, and he'd sworn his friendship to her. He declared that she was one of his precious people. He valued her existence, and she declared she'd help him accomplish his dream and become leader of his village. She smiled. That was a large oath on her part, one that she might not have made quite so swiftly without the sake, but she knew she still would have made it. They were very much alike. Both of them wished to become strong to protect their precious people, and by declaring that she was important to him, he became important to her as well. A look of contentment came to Haku's face as she felt a bit of the void in her spirit fill. She'd been afraid that she'd be unwanted again, but she'd already found another precious person, and Naruto's offer to introduce her to his precious people. It was almost enough to make her feel giddy. After taking a moment to bask in the warmth, she returned to trying to remember the night before. Now, what had happened next? She furrowed her brow in concentration and thought. She flushed. Then they'd started to tease each other, and she got angry, and showed him she was a girl by standing up and flashing him. Then her eyes went wide as she flushed brightly, and gasped in embarrassment. Oh my! Then she fell on top of him and they started to kiss and do this, that, and the other thing. To make matters worse, their sensei and the black-haired boy walked in on them. She shook her head. Almost by this point she was all but glowing red with humiliation. She didn't want to remember anymore. It was too embarrassing. She took a deep breath and tried to fight down her blush. How was she going to face everyone like this? She was so embarrassed. She didn't know what to say or dash. Hey, Haku-chan! With a small exclamation of surprise, Haku jumped back and spun around to face the new interloper. Biting back a groan, she grabbed her head and cursed under her breath. She'd been startled, and the momentary disruption of her concentration had been just enough to allow her saban to melt, giving her hangover leave to return full force. Her eyes slightly narrowed as they focused on the blonde boy in the doorway. She wanted to be mad, but the look of barely constrained joy on his face made that difficult. Seeing her presence cause such happiness in others, it made her feel valued, and that feeling was more than worth any temporal discomfort. What do you want? Haku asked, with a slight grimace of pain on her face. I just wanted to see what you were doing, that's all, Naruto said, smiling radiantly at her. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she replied, wincing again as her brain felt like it was pulsing in her head. But could you keep your voice down? The boy blinked in slight surprise and bewilderment, but acquiesced. Huh. Oh sure, Naruto said in a quieter voice. Thank you, Haku whispered hoarsely as she summoned a second set of ice senbons from the ambient moisture, and moved to use them to dull her hangover. Seeing her about to place the ice needles into her flesh, Naruto reacted with surprising speed. Huh! Hey, what the heck are you doing that for? Naruto shouted, frantically grabbing for the needles before she could stick them into her head. Don't touch those. Haku growled, pushing him away. I have a hangover and they help with the pain. Oh. Sorry, I didn't know you could do that, Naruto said. He didn't know that much about acupuncture or anything like that, but B, he supposed it made sense if you could make people appear dead with needles in the right places. Then why not relieve pain? She winced in both pain and frustration as she looked down at the puddle of water in her hands. The moment of distraction caused her to lose focus again. With a sigh she summoned yet another set and carefully applied them. She sighed in slight contentment as her headache once again became manageable. This would be much easier if I didn't have to focus on them, she reflecting, plopping back onto her back with her arms spread to the side, jostling her top. Naruto blushed and his eyes went wide, but he was unable to look away, gaze firmly locked on Haku's chest and the bountiful treasures that had been partially exposed from her loose top. Part of his mind told him he was a pervert, while his awakening hormones told that part to sit down and shut up and enjoy the sight of her glorious peaks that you could make it, if you turned your head and looked just right. Haku met his stupid smile with a peaked eyebrow and slowly followed his gaze downwards. Her eyes went wide and she blushed brightly as she snapped her yukata shut, while simultaneously shooting him a withering stare. Sorry, Naruto said, slapping a hand over his eyes. I'm sorry, really. He turned away for good measure. Haku sighed. It was just hard to get mad at him. For someone who'd always wanted nothing more than to be appreciated, any attention was better than none, even if it wasn't entirely innocent. Besides, he was cute when he was embarrassed. It made him difficult to stay angry with. Naruto-kun, I know you're not a pervert. She took a deep breath. Since they've already had managed to work themselves into an awkward situation, might as well take that last step and make things downright uncomfortable. After all, they need to talk about it eventually. About what happened last night, Naruto blushed harder. I admit, neither of us were in our right minds. She sighed. We were both drunk and acted like fools. Naruto lowered his hand and stared at her. But Haku-chan, I wouldn't. Naruto couldn't help being confused. Last night was, well, the affection-starved boy found himself cursing his sensei for interrupting it. Haku was so soft, so warm, and how she touched him, he sighed. It was overwhelming to a boy who could probably count how many times he'd been hugged in his life on both hands. I know you wouldn't. It was nice being close to someone, even though it wasn't. She paused, looking for the correct word, appropriate. She sighed and lowered her head. By showing my secret, I've endangered myself, Naruto-kun. What? Why? Naruto asked, even more confused. Haku was strong. So strong he had to call on its power to defeat her. You're strong. Why would you hide what you are, Naruto-kun? She asked seriously. Do you have any idea what Kiri Hunter-nin do to kunoichi they capture alive before they kill them? Naruto frowned and shook his head. From Haku's tone of voice though, it couldn't be anything good. She paused and looked at him levelly. He really couldn't be that naive, could he? You really don't, do you? No, Naruto admitted. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In the past, Zabuza had told her many times that the ninja of Konohagakure were soft. While she would never insult them by saying it aloud, it was true. They were soft, but she believed that there was a strength in that softness. Those who harden their hearts lack the ability to protect their precious people. But if Naruto was indicative of their genin, then it really was a two-edged sword. They had that strength strong, but they were blind to some of the true horrors of the world. She released her breath and opened her eyes. Without the protection of a hidden village, chances are that if I am ever captured alive by Hunter-nin, I will be brutally raped and then murdered. Naruto stared in slack-jawed horror at Haku, and then his eyes narrowed to slits, literally, as a wellspring of righteous, burning rage rose up from the depths of Naruto's heart. He hadn't known Haku for long, but she was a good person and he'd be damned if he let anything like that happen to her. Well then, you're coming back to Konoha with us, Naruto said. His tone brooked no argument. Thank you, Naruto-kun, Haku said after a moment's reflection. But I am afraid that is either of our decisions to make. I'm sure the old man will let you into the village. I mean, there's gotta be some way to do it, Naruto said in an enthusiastic voice. Haku smiled thinly. You are a very special person, Naruto-kun. Naruto blushed, and grinned widely at her. Well, so are you to me. Haku flushed and smiled softly, as she felt a warmth rise up from chest. Naruto-kun, were you serious when you said that I am a precious person to you? I am serious, Naruto said with complete sincerity. Totally seriously. I promise to do whatever it takes to keep you safe. And I always keep my promises, always. Databeo, thank you, Naruto-kun. His smile widened. And I was serious with mine. I will do all I can to help you achieve your dreams. Well then, that's all there is to it, Naruto nodded. We'll achieve our dreams together, Haku-chan. I promise. Haku smiled radiantly at the boy, and looking at him with kindly. Naruto-kun, she began softly. Naruto blushed, and with his heart pounding in his chest, he reached out to take Haku's hand, and looked her right in the eyes. It felt a bit cheesy, but it seemed to work in the few films he'd managed to sneak into to see. Would you please get me a glass of water, some painkillers, and maybe some real saban? I am in a great deal of pain right now, she completed. Naruto coughed, and let her hand go as the moment shattered around him. Right. I'll be right back. Tsunami smiled to herself as the smell of grilling fish permeated the air of her home's kitchen. For the first time since Kaisa's death, she wasn't plagued by a nagging sense of dread that had overtaken the entire country. For the first time in a long time, the country of Wave was free from Gato's tyranny. To her this was a double relief, as it also meant that her father was no longer being targeted by Gato's thugs and ninja. She frowned slightly. Gato's ninja. There was the one sour point that threatened to ruin her relief. Last night they brought home that cross-dressing ninja girl of Gato's. She knew ninja didn't take little things like attempted murder personally. It was just business. But she wasn't a ninja and she'd already lost her husband to that bastard midget. How dare they try and kill her father? Really, the only reason she even let the girl into her house was because she'd felt some sympathy for her. Her own father figure had just been killed and she had inadvertently avenged Kaisa by killing that vile little shrimp. Of course, she'd immediately gone and spent all that goodwill by getting drunk in her furor and almost having her way with Naruto-kun. Oh, that girl was just lucky she'd been putting Inari to bed, because if he'd been there to see that particular bit of chaos, ninja or not, heads would have rolled. Even now, the only reason she didn't kick out that cross-dressing seductress was that she didn't want to anger Kakashi and Naruto after all they'd done for her family. Hey, Tsunami-ne-chan? Do we have aspirin? I didn't find any in our first aid kits, so I gotta ask you. Tsunami almost jumped out of her skin. She hadn't heard him coming at all. How could a kid that loud move so silently? It was moments like this that reminded her that while yes, Naruto was a sweet, hyperactive kid, he was also a trained killer. Regardless of that, he still managed to be one of the most honorable and kind people she'd ever met. She smiled. He was a wonderful boy. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, but I believe we're out. I believe you sensei already used the last of them. Then threw her the bottle and told her to go buy more. Damn freeloader. Crap. Naruto cursed. He shook his head and sighed. Saban it is, I guess. Naruto pulled out a canteen, filled it up from the tap, and started towards the door. Once he reached in, he turned around and smiled at her. Thanks, Tsunami-ne-chan. Tsunami frowned slightly. She could hear a weariness in his voice, and she didn't like it. Is something the matter, HM? Naruto blinked. Oh. No. Haku-chan's just got a headache. I was just getting her some water. About that, she crossed her arms and looked at him sternly, her frown deepening into a full scowl. While I do understand that you are young, you will behave yourselves in this house. You are very fortunate that Inari wasn't here when your friend had his fit. That is a talk that I would like avoid for the next few years. Do you understand me, young man? Naruto blushed deeply in embarrassment, and scratched the back of his head with a big, silly grin on his face. Right, Tsunami-ne-chan? Sorry about that. It won't happen again, promise. It better not, she replied, glaring at him. I'm sorry, he said again, viably wilting under her gaze as he began to look down at his feet. It cut deeply to have someone he liked look at him like that. It felt like the cold stares of the villagers. I really am. Tsunami's annoyance vanished in a moment. She was angry with him, but she didn't want to make him sad. He'd saved her life. He'd saved her son's life. He'd saved her father's life. He'd brought hope back to their entire country. He'd defeated Gato's minions with his own 2,000 hands. He was a hero, and she never wanted to see him look this sad. She smiled and placed her hand on his shoulder, and smiled warmly. I accept your apology, Naruto-kun. The fire in Naruto's eyes light right back up and his endearing smile returned, as bright as ever. Thank you, Tsunami-ne-chan. So, Haku-san has a hangover? She asked sternly, changing the subject. Yes she does, Naruto said, fidgeting. While before her stare had reminded him of the villagers, now she reminded him of Iruka-sensei when he caught him greasing the toilet seats in the facility lounge again. Feeling that she owed the boy a bit of explanation for her coldness, she began. Naruto-kun, while I do understand that you as ninja don't take such thing personally, she did try to kill my father, and I am not a ninja. I know, Tsunami-ne-chan, I know, but she isn't going to now. And he's not dead. And she just lost, well, her father, basically, Naruto said. It was the best analogy he could draw. She nodded. I understand that, but that girl is trouble. Getting drunk and trying to seduce you? You deserve better. Naruto flushed brightly and began to twiddle his thumbs. Actually, that's all my fault, he admitted after a minute of studying his toes. What? Tsunami asked levelly. I was the one who brought the sake into the bath. What? Tsunami repeated, just as coolly as before. I didn't know she was a girl, and Kakashi-sensei gave me the sake, and he said that it helps make the pain stop and that friendships start when you drink together, and thought Haku might like a drink, and things just kind of happened. First, he reads those perverted orange books in front of her son. Then he freeloads without even saying thank you. Now he sets up sweet Naruto-kun and that apparently innocent and grieving Haku girl up for this kind of embarrassment. Tsunami took a deep breath. Alright, she was decided. Hatake Kakashi must die, and if she had any chance of being successful she would go into his room right now and smother him to death with a pillow herself. After a moment, Tsunami sighed and began to collect herself. Then without a word said, she began to rummage through the shelves and drawers of her kitchen, collecting a bewildering series of strange ingredients, including but not limited to raw eggs, soy sauce, beef bouillon, cold black tea, and raw wasabi from around the kitchen. Then with practice ease, she dumped the ingredients into the blender and moments later poured the resulting viscous liquid into a glass which she then offered to Naruto. Give her this. What is it? Naruto asked, wearily studying the liquid as if he was afraid it was going to jump out of the glass and attack him. Hangover cure, she replied. Tell her to pinch her nose and drink it in one go or it won't work. Are you sure this is even fit for human consumption? He asked, still unsure. Probably not, she admitted, but it works for my father, and he's still alive. Thanks to you? Naruto's face lit back up. Okay. Thanks, Tsunami-ne-chan, Naruto said, hugging the older woman a bit awkwardly. Still, it was the best way he could think of to convey his thanks. You're welcome, Naruto-kun. Just tell her to behave herself while she's staying here. I will have no repeats of last night. I understand, Tsunami-ne-chan. Don't worry, no repeats of last night. Naruto repeated, heading out the door. His newly awakened libido cheered on the fact that there were many ways to exploit the language. Sakura yawned and scratched the back of her head as she walked out of the bathroom. After the last week, she was so happy that she'd been given a chance to sleep in. With a smile on her face, she took in a deep breath from her nose. She immediately regretted it. What is that smell? She exclaimed, gagging and pinching her nose in hopes of keeping any more of the stench out. It smells like rotten feet. With a grimace on her face, she turned towards the source of the stench, and of course, without any doubt, she should have known. It was coming from Naruto. She frowned. Okay, what's he up to now? What could have done to create such a stink? Probably shit himself or something. She resisted the urge to shake her head. Nah, he wasn't that bad. True, but he was still an idiot, and a far cry from Sasuke. Shinaro, she grinned like a shark and nodded, in complete agreement with herself. Still, she needed to see what the heck was going on. Blissfully unaware of Sakura's ongoing inner dialogue, Naruto smiled as he passed her and paused to say hello. Oh, hey Sakura-chan. Sakura frowned at him and looked down at the glass of something in his hands. With a grimace on her face, she immediately knew that it was the origin this horrible odor. She could almost taste it. Yuck, what is that stuff? She demanded. It's a hangover cure for Haku-chan, Naruto replied. How is that supposed to cure a hangover? Make him forget about it due to the smell. Sakura scowled, crossing her arms. And how would you know how to make a hangover cure anyways? I don't, Tsunami-ne-chan made it, Naruto said. He shrugged and scowled. I don't know how it works, but if Tsunami-ne-chan says it will, then it will, Sakura blinked. Oh. After a moment she frowned. Sakura frowned. So what exactly happened last night? Naruto blushed heavily. Well, why do you want to know? He asked quietly. She glared at him angrily, her eyebrow twitching freely. Really, the only reason she didn't hit him right there was she was afraid that cup of stuff would eat through the floorboards, or ever worse, get on her. What did you do to Haku-san? Huh? Nothing. I didn't do anything to her. What makes you think I did anything with her? To her? Naruto tried, feeling nervous. Sakura was unpredictable, crazy, and violent. He had to admit that for some reason that was part of the reason he liked her. But he didn't want Sakura to upset the cure and water he had for Haku, so he was forced to do something he was not accustomed to, making fast excuses. Nothing. Then what was that Sasuke said about you making out with? She paused for a moment, as she rewound their conversation. Wait a second, her? She exclaimed. Haku's a girl? Well, yeah, she is a girl, Naruto said. He couldn't help the dopey smile that emerged on his face as he recalled just how much of a girl she really was. Sakura began to twitch madly, trying to decide how to react. She was going to kill him. That damn pervert. Poor Haku-san was upset over her father, and he tried to take advantage of her. She was going to make him wish he was never born. Bah. He was probably just being an idiot. Bet he didn't even know she was a girl. Heck, Naruto wouldn't know sex if you forced him to read a copy of Ika Ika, though he was still the pervert who created that perverted Orochi no Jutsu, but he was a pervert who uses perversion against other perverts. When it comes to his own self, he was a total moron. For the Kami's sake, he was too dense to notice how hard Hinata had it for him, and she had it so hard it was downright creepy. Stalker creepy. She hated people like that. Yeah, but Haku's a girl? What a disappointment. Even though he's an idiot, Naruto's still pretty cute, at least when he wasn't talking. Not as cute as Sasuke. Of course not, but still cute, and Haku made a really cute guy. Just the idea of two guys that cute in the steamy bath naked, glistening bodies, showing their love for each other. Yeah. That sucked, but at least she saw Sasuke's thingy. Shinaro. Beat that Ino pig. Bahaha. Naruto felt a bit awkward just standing there as Sakura spaced out with that creepy smile on her face. It was like she wasn't even there. After a moment he wove his hand in front of her face. Nada. He stepped back and grimaced. Was that drool, Sakura? You alright? Naruto asked, concerned. What? Sakura asked, snapping back to reality. What were we talking about again? Naruto found that thinking was actually a very helpful thing to do. Past experience, combined with his knowledge of Sakura's personality, forced him to the conclusion that he should take a break when he saw one. Haku being a girl. Speaking of which, I need to go see her, she has a hangover and stuff. Sakura blushed and nodded. Right. You go do that. Wow. Naruto took a deep breath as he left. Thinking before I act really kicks ass. I'll have to do it more often. Quickly putting his crazy teammate behind him, he entered Haku's room, smiling brightly. He felt a sting of pity mixed with guilt, as he saw Haku laying on her futon with her head under her pillow, moaning pitifully. She was laying on her stomach with her rear slightly in the air. Now, that was one part of her that he hadn't seen the night before, but from what he could guess through the thin robe it was as nice as the rest of her. He shook his head, banishing the bad thoughts. With a frown on his face, he sat down next to her. Haku-chan? I'm back, I've got water and a hangover cure, he winced. He'd gotten so mixed up with Sakura-chan, he'd forgotten to check their weapons pile for Haku-chan's needles. Now he really felt like a jerk. Regardless, he continued, maybe she wouldn't need them. He continued, Tsunami-chan made it, she says to pinch your nose while you drink it though, otherwise it won't work. Haku turned over and looked at the glass of cure dubiously. Honestly, he couldn't blame her. Are you sure that isn't some kind of poison? Tsunami-chan wouldn't poison you, Naruto said. She says it hasn't killed her dad yet, and she makes it for him all the time. Are you sure? She asked, taking the glass and looking at it with a grimace that was almost comical on such a pretty face. I know it smells horrible, but I trust her, Naruto said firmly. She looked at him for a moment then nodded. Slowly, she pinched her nose and started to drink it. Her face twisted into a mask of complete suffering, but she kept chugging until it's gone. The second she was finished, she pushed the glass into Naruto's hands, and made a beeline for the restroom holding her mouth. Naruto, alarmed, ran in behind her, ignoring Sakura's indignant sputtering as he pushed past her. Inside he found Haku on her knees, worshipping the porcelain goddess by offering up the contents of her stomach in sacrifice. Naruto was reminded of the time I got really sick and he stayed with her and her dad for a week to take care of her so her father didn't have to close the restaurant. He simply held her hair and let her do what she needed to, like he'd done for Ayam when she was ill. He looked back at the door and saw Sakura on the other side. At first she was giving him a dirty look, but as she looked on, her face softened until she nodded to him and closed the sliding door behind them. Once she was finished heaving, Haku slowly sat on the tile floor and looked over to him. Naruto-kun, Haku said wearily, next time you hand me some mysterious, vile-smelling so-called cure, I'm going to force you to drink it yourself. Fair enough, Naruto said, handing her the canteen and offering to help her up. She accepted both, and stumbled over to the sink, leaning over it for support. Looking in the mirror, she frowned slightly at her split lip and the black and blue bruises on her face. Naruto winced as if struck. He caused those. He hurt her, and while she was an enemy at the time, he still didn't like being responsible. Not noticing Naruto's discomfort, Haki used the canteen to wash out her mouth and grimaced, rubbing her temples. She looked back down at the canteen, then drank the rest and smiled. Looking back to Naruto, she said, I think it worked. Naruto's sorrow was lightened by the sound of relief in her voice. Well, see? That's great. Told ya, Naruto grinned. She cowled and grabbed her side with a wince as she stood up. Naruto grimaced, once again feeling responsibility for her discomfort, and wrapped an arm around her waist to support her, as they slowly made their way out of the restroom. In the living room, Sakura frowned for a moment in internal debate, then asked, Naruto, where's Kakashi-sensei? He said we could sleep in, Naruto replied. But Tsunami-chan's almost done breakfast, so maybe you should wake him and Sasuke up. I'm going to help Haku out. She nodded to him, and he continued on to Haku's room. Once they were inside, he closed the door, helped her lay back down on her futon, and sat nearby, feeling rather self-conscious. Haku-chan? He began. He was trying to find something to say, but this thinking thing made it hard to just blurt out whatever came to mind. He was actually glad about that. Asking her if they could make out some more probably wouldn't go over well. Yes, Naruto-kun? She asked, turning to him. He sucked in a deep breath as he looked at her. She was sitting on the futon, leaning back against the wall with her legs extended and slightly spread, dressed in a yukata that looked to be a couple sizes too large. The thin robe fell open about her breasts, not enough to flash him like before, but enough to show him some skin. The robe was riding up slightly, giving him an uninterrupted view of smooth legs and hint of creamy white thighs. So do you need my help with anything? He asked, part of him hoping beyond hope that whatever she asked would involve getting naked. Haku nodded and lifted up what looked like a bandage from her clothes pile. I'd like you to help me put on my breast bindings. With the sourness in my muscles I find that I do not have the range of motion to put them on properly. Sure thing, Haku-chan. Naruto grinned. So it all actually was true. There really was a god, and he did listen to our prayers. Chapter 3, Breakfast Thoughts and Kage Dreams. Kakashi suppressed a yawn as he stepped into the bathroom. While normally he woke up early, today he decided that everyone had earned a good night's sleep. It wasn't every day that a genin team was able to take down an S-rank nuke nin, potentially secured a powerful Kekkai Genkai for Konoha, unlocked another, and then rounded it all out by routing an entire army of bandits. Then, to make matters even more interesting, one of his cute little genin lost his innocence in battle, then followed it up by almost losing his cherry to a hot older kunoichi, a new nin whose tight little ass he'd kicked just hours before. It brought a tear to his eye. They grow up so fast. Glancing about for a moment to make sure the coast was clear, Kakashi pulled down his mask and began to brush his teeth, letting his mind wander back to his previous train of thought. Ah, Naruto. Boy really was full of surprises. Until now he thought that the kid was all bark no bite, but now he was realizing that maybe in this case the biggest mouth came with the largest teeth. He almost wished that Sasuke had taken his time. Dealing with the aftermath would have been damned annoying, but after Naruto's exemplary performance that day, he felt a bit guilty for blocking the poor kid. Kakashi was willing to admit that even he would have had a bitch of a time dealing with all those bandits, at least without pulling out some heavy-duty jutsu that would have done as much damage to the bridge as to the bandits. Naruto on the other hand just pulled his own army out of his ass and met them head-on. He lost a couple points for style, for just charging in without a plan, but the boy had still earned an A for awesome. He moved his toothbrush about and nodded. Thinking back to Haku, Kakashi himself had to admit he'd have had a hard time saying no to a teenage hottie like that. Although it had been called for under his duty as a teacher to embarrass his students at any and all opportunity, it still was a major breach of man law that wasn't easily forgiven. He'd definitely have to make it up to the kid for, as Guy would put it, dousing his burning fires of youth. He bit the toothbrush head and wiggled the handle from side to side, thinking how to make it up to the boy. Considering how jutsu mad the Gaki was, he knew all would be forgiven with a new jutsu. He couldn't just teach the kid a new one. It would be unfair to his other students, and teaching them all a new technique would undermine the entire point. What to do? What to do? He grinned. Oh yeah? He'd simply pass the kid a copy of the standard Shadow Clone scroll from the Jonin library when they got back home. Now, while it might seem like a weak way to say sorry, considering that the brat already knew the damn technique, the simple fact was that Naruto had learned it by reverse engineering Taijutsu Bunshin no Jutsu into the standard version. The standard scroll's instructions included essays on the 1001 creative uses for the techniques. Everything from serving as the perfect expendable scout, to speeding up your learning time, to helping you deal with unwanted paperwork. The forbidden scroll, on the other hand, he had a strong feeling the use instructions consisted of all of one word, don't. He'd also have to exhibit Bushin Bakuho no Jutsu for the kid. If anything could get a kid who was able to safely use Taijutsu Bunshin no Jutsu to sit down, shut up, and do what he was told, it was the explosive clone technique. Now, he knew he wouldn't be able to lord it over the kid forever, but by the time he was sick of chasing that carrot on a stick, Sasuke would be ready to learn the fire dragon, and he guessed her could get Sakura started on some basic genjutsu or something. Sakura. He sighed. Honestly, he wasn't exactly sure what to do with the girl. She was simply not suitable for the kind of training he could teach effectively. All of Kakashi's own strengths were her weaknesses. He was a ninjutsu specialist who focused on heavy combat and assassination, most of which were highly complicated techniques that benefited from good control but required great deal of power. Sakura on the other had some of the best control he'd ever seen from a genin, but almost laughable chakra reserves. In other words, she was a natural genjutsu type. Not for the first time he regretted that he hadn't put more effort into talking Kurenai out of the Hyuga girl. Under Kurenai she would have been able to play to her strengths, and away from Sasuke she'd have had a chance to become something more than the head of the last Uchiha's cheerleading section. He shook his head. With a Hyuga he could have done so much more. Oh well, hindsight was 20/20, and this wasn't greatest mistake he'd made in his life. He opened his Sharingan eye and looked into it. No, very far from it. Closing his eye, he spit out the toothpaste in his mouth and drew a glass of water from the sink. Taking a sip of it he started to swish it through his mouth, still thinking. Banishing his momentary melancholy he smiled. Naruto and Sasuke on the other hand had the potential to be a source of infinite amusement. Now that Sasuke had unlocked his Sharingan, he'd literally be able to learn new techniques at a glance. He'd expected this, and had been preparing for it. Naruto on the other hand was a pleasant but unexpected surprise. He'd expected a loud-mouthed moron and hadn't been disappointed. He'd been ready to simply dismiss the kid as more dead weight, but then he'd gone and proven Kakashi wrong. Oh, he was still a loudmouth, but the kid seemed to work well under pressure and had proven to be the greatest master of the shadow clone technique he'd ever seen. He'd been able to learn the Kinjutsu version in just one night, and was able to create literally an army at will. For all of his faults, one couldn't question the boy's work ethic, and with his mastery of Kage Bunshin, he'd be able to literally log thousands of man-hours of training in a single day. The genius bloodline of the Uchiha clan versus the ultimate genius of hard work. Would be one hell of a show. He chuckled. He'd have to keep this quiet. The last thing he wanted to deal with was a full-fledged Mato Guy youth rant. Double true if he brought his team. Guy was bad enough alone. Guy plus his creepy little mini-me was downright freakish. Sasuke scowled for probably the 15th time in so many minutes as he picked at his breakfast, completely ignoring the world around him. In all honesty, he was in a pretty foul mood after the humiliating display the night before, and was only compounded by one especially painful fact. The dope was closer to rebuilding his clan than Sasuke himself. Sasuke had no doubts that the fool was from some ninja clan. His insane endurance, near bottomless chakra reserves, and rapid healing couldn't be anything but a Kekkai Genkai. It made him question why the other boy was so hated by the villagers. Was he the only survivor of a clan of traitors? Sasuke snorted. It didn't matter. He refused to judge a person on the sins of his kin. Otherwise he might be forced to draw comparisons between himself and his brother. He could safely say he disliked Naruto on his own merits. He was a loud-mouthed idiot who refused to accept the superiority of the natural genius of the Uchiha clan over the power of his own bloodline, no matter how formidable it may be. Now that he'd unlocked his own Kekkai Genkai, Sasuke was sure that he'd leave the dobe in the dust, though even if he didn't, he did respect the fool's tenacity. Not that he'd ever admit it aloud. Forcing his thought processes back on track, he raged at the indignity of it all. The idiot had been moments away from going all the way with an extremely beautiful and skilled girl, the kind of woman that Sasuke would have a hard time saying no to. It was just unfair. The no-name from an hated clan that had obviously done some ill so great that the adults were forbidden to speak of them had strong and beautiful kunoichi attracted to him, while he, the last member of the greatest clan in the whole of the elemental nations, had fucking Pinky and the Blonde, along with the rest of the legion of useless fangirls. While he wasn't old enough to rebuild his clan as of yet, when he was, in a couple of years, he'd require women who were emotionally and physically prepared to go about the long and bloody work of rebuilding his clan. He needed mothers, not a pack of vapid, romance-addled fangirls who were too blind to see the world as it was beyond their own petty delusions. Hell, even Hyuga would be a step up. Sure, there was the overriding issue of dojutsu incomparability which made such a coupling untenable, but at least she seemed to have a reasonable level of emotional and mental maturity, even if she was a doormat. She had a clear enough head to understand that he had no time for foolish romance, and probably the fortitude and definitely the patience to be a good mother. She also had great tits for a 12-year-old. Oh, why couldn't he attract older women, like Kiba's hot sister, or even that scantily clad psychopath that worked for Enbuti? If that wasn't humiliation enough, that entire gay scene made him look like a complete and utter tool. How was he supposed to know she was a woman? It was misty in there, he couldn't see any of her impressive womanly assets from where he'd been, and had taken the dobe's word for it. Damn it. Still, it hasn't been a total loss. He'd seen her boobs and he had to admit that they were a damned fine set. He smirked. It made him want to start interviewing potential Uchiha mothers right away. There was one negative side effect though. He simply couldn't ignore the poorly hidden glances that Sakura was sneaking at him, and Naruto. That creepy, lecherous smile of hers was even worse. He grimaced and tried to side away from her, but she slid right back up next to him. He hadn't been of a mind to really consider it at the time, but she collapsed with a nosebleed when he mentioned that Haku and Naruto were being gay in the bath. He shuddered. Not only was she useless, but she was also into yaoi, and she had the hypocritical gall to call Naruto a pervert because he'd been clever enough to create a technique as effective, a bit silly, as the Oryoku no Jutsu? Fucking pervert. Kakashi cheerfully entered the room with a smile under his mask. As per normal he was late. After all, he did have a reputation to uphold. As he'd expected, everyone was already at the table. Sasuke seemed to be in an especially foul mood today, something most people wouldn't be able to tell, considering his moods tended to hover between grumpy, grouchy, and pissy at all times. Also per usual, Sakura was hovering over him like a vulture circling a dying yak, blissfully unaware of the fact that the object of her affection was completely ignoring her at best, and remaining silently contemptuous of her affections at worst. Naruto was surprisingly bright-eyed and cheerful for someone who drained half a bottle of cheap, high-potency sake the night before, and was sitting tellingly close to Haku. Now as for the pretty little Nuke-Nin, she looked exactly as you'd expect of the person who drained the other half of aforementioned bottle of sake, absolutely miserable, and much to Kakashi's eternal amusement, was shooting telling glances at his most loud-mouthed genin. Ah, young sexual tension, it was just like Ika. Now, the civilians seemed to be mostly an improvement from their normal pitifully obnoxious states. Tazuna was actually sober for once, standing tall, proud, and actually managing to not smell like a sake brewery. Inori seemed almost irritatingly happy and content with himself, which was a major improvement from the annoying, loud-mouthed little shit he'd acted like up to this point. Tsunami on the other hand was shooting an almost unbelievable amount of killing intent for an untrained civilian at him. He was impressed. If she'd been trained she'd probably be able to kill a lesser man with it. Now, he didn't know what he'd done to piss the MILF off, but if it made her this angry, finding out was probably a good idea. Good morning, he happily announced. You're late. Sakura snapped. Kakashi happily ignored her griping, as usual, and looked to the bridge builder's hot daughter as he took his seat. Tsunami's eyes narrowed and a very palpable chill made its way up his spine. Damn. Woman had missed her calling. If she'd been trained as a ninja, she might even be scarier than Anko, and that's one freaky bitch. Is something the matter? He asked, wondering exactly what had gotten her silky whites in a bunch. I do not appreciate you sending a young boy into my furo with a bottle of sake while it was occupied by a teenage girl, she snapped in response. Naruto blushed brightly and looked over to her. Don't be mad at Kakashi-sensei, Tsunami-ne-chan. Tsunami glared at him expectantly, so he continued. Yesterday, When I fought all those thugs, he took a deep breath. I'd never killed anyone before. Naruto's statement crashed over the room like a wave. Immediately all eyes were on the boy. Sasuke was looking at him with a palpable sense of respect, and nodded in acknowledgement of his ability. First, Sakura was agape, probably not having been able to look past Sasuke during the fight to even realize that Naruto had been protecting them. Haku smiled sadly and placed her hand on Naruto's to comfort him. Tsunami was simply agape, her civilian mind having probably not comprehended that a 12-year-old could be a killer, even in the aftermath of a pitched battle. Inari was looking at Naruto with the complete admiration that only hero worship could bring, and Tazuna stood up from his place at the head of the table. The drunken bridge builder looked at Naruto with hard eyes for a moment, taking the boy in, and then he bowed, deeply. Thank you very much, Naruto-kun, Kakashi grinned. Even with such a serious subject, it was entertaining to see Naruto's blushing like mad and scratching the back of his head with a stupid smile on his face, basking in the attention. You know, Kakashi remarked, Naruto took out the thugs, but it was Haku who killed Gato. If credit was being passed around, the girl deserved some. That had been one hell of a shot. Tsunami turned to Haku and after a moment of thought, bowed slightly to her. Thank you, Haku-san. By killing Gato you have done my people a great service. I apologize for my harsh treatment of you. Haku smiled at the older woman. Thank you, Tsunami-san, but it is I who should be apologizing to you. I aided in attempts to kill one of your loved ones, yet you still have found it within you to open your home to me. It is I who should be thanking you. Tsunami flushed slightly and smiled. You are not what I expected, Haku-san. You expected someone colder and more bloodthirsty? Haku asked. Tsunami nodded with frown. I am shinobi, Haku replied. I have no animosity towards your father, and do not wish him any harm. But Zabuza-san took the contract from Gato, and so I was required to act against him. As cold as it may sound, I was not personal and I'd have much rather have left you to live your lives in peace. Tsunami scowled. The life of ninja sounds very cold and unfeeling. Haku nodded, sadly. That is I. There are times I envy you civilians and your ability to live your lives free of ever-present specter of death that haunts us. It almost sounds like you don't really want to be a ninja, Sakura thought aloud. No, Haku said. It is not that I did not wish to become a ninja and more that I was never given a choice. It was the dictate of my bloodline, Sakura blinked. What do you mean? That, Haku replied calmly but with a slight chill to her voice, is an intensely personal question that touches upon parts of my past that I'd rather not speak of. Sasuke nodded to Haku in understanding. Kakashi rolled his eye at the breakfast table drama unfolding before him and helped himself to some rice, miso, and a bit of grilled fish. Once everything seemed back on track, he turned to Tazuna and absently asked, Our contract requires us to remain here until the bridge has been completed. I need to know how long it will be before it is finished. Tazuna sighed. 2 months. Oh man, Naruto whined. We're going to be stuck here forever. The old man scowled and shot the genin a dirty look. Listen, kid, we have to repair all of the equipment that Zabuza smashed. Then I'm going to have to replace all of the workers that Gato ran off while I was out of the country. All of this takes time. So, unless you can pull an army out of your ass. The old man trailed off then smiled from ear to ear, looking at the genin the way a bear might look at an especially plump deer. Say, kid, you ever consider working in construction? What? Naruto asked. I mean with that clone thing you can do I won't have to worry about finding new workers. Sure, Naruto replied. Anything to get out of here. Kakashi coughed, attracting both of their attentions. There are bylaws in the Konoha mission codes that cover ninja doing side jobs while on a mission. If he accepts you will be required to pay the processing fee for equivalent ranked mission and pay him like you would any other worker. I'd go into more detail, but it's all in the contract scroll you got when you hired us. Tazuna nodded. Alright. I'll read over it. Kakashi nodded. Fair enough. We also need to discuss how you're going to pay the difference between the C-ranked mission you hired us for, and the A-ranked mission it turned out to be. Because of the desperate situation your people were in, I'm going to ask the Hokage to waive the punitive fines but you're still going to have to pay the rest. Tazuna grimaced. Does it have to be all at once? Can't you just take it out of the bridge tolls or something? Kakashi nodded. Sounds reasonable enough. When we get back to Konoha we'll have them send you a contract. Tazuna smiled and finished off his tea. Ah. Well, now that's taken care of, time to get to work. He stood up and smiled at Konoha's loudest genin. Naruto, I look forward to showing you how the other side makes an honest living. The boy laughed. Yeah, we'll see you old drunk. Inari smiled and looked at his mother who nodded. Pushing up from the table he ran over to Tazuna. I'll walk you to work, Grandpa. Kakashi simply smiled as the table began to empty, with everyone going about their daily tasks, leaving just Tsunami waiting so she could finish. Looking back to his meal and picked up a piece of fish and began to eat. Tsunami-chan, have I told you that you're a wonderful cook? The woman frowned, and placed her hands on her hips. While she was not releasing the staggering amount of killing intent she had been before, it was apparently clear that she was annoyed. Just hurry up and eat. I have to clean the dishes. You know, Kakashi observed, it's rude to rush people's digestion. It's rude to be late for a meal, she countered. Kakashi simply took a sip of tea and shrugged. Touché. Haku smiled as she walked next to Naruto as the two left Tazuna's house. She didn't know where he was going, but it was pleasant to walk with her friend regardless. Closing her eyes and took a deep breath, knowing that she had a very busy day ahead of her. There were simply too many things that needed to get done, and with her physical injury combined with her chakra fatigue, she didn't feel in much of a condition to accomplish it. Still, she had to get it done regardless. Looking at the younger boy next to her, she parsed her lips thoughtfully. While she still didn't know Naruto very well, she was already well aware that he was the most energetic person she'd ever met. His personality was vibrant to the point of being overwhelming, and his stamina had to be superhuman. While she hadn't seen it, she'd been told about the Shadow Clone Army he'd used to defeat Gato's men. It was a little selfish, but just maybe she smiled. Naruto-kun? Haku asked. Yeah, Haku-chan? The orange-clad boy asked, looking up to her with a smile across his face. What do you need? Where are you headed? She asked. Naruto smiled. I'm going into the woods to train. How about you? Becoming stronger to protect your precious people, Haku asked, wistfully. Yeah. Naruto exclaimed. I'm going to get stronger so I can protect you and everyone else I care about. Then I'll become Hokage and be able to protect everyone. And they'll have no choice but to acknowledge me because I'll be somebody that everyone can look up to. Haku's smile grew as she took in Naruto's words. It was strange to her that she was already beginning to feel the same kind of selfless dedication for him that she'd felt for Zabuza-san, but she guessed it was due to his nature. Already he counted her among his most precious people, and it warmed her heart. He was a pure spirit, heroic and kind. The type of person who made you feel stronger just for knowing him, and whose radiance could bring the best out in people. This did make her wonder though. Naruto had a passion for training that was beyond impressive. His spirit made him a natural leader of men, and his chakra reserves were beyond ludicrous. In most villages, a person like him would be considered a genius, a prodigy with the potential to become one of the most powerful ninja in the elemental countries. Why then was he so much like her? How could someone like him, someone with so much potential, understand pain of being forgotten and unwanted? Any sensei worth his salt should have been ecstatic to have a student like him, yet besides his frightening hidden power, he was woefully undertrained. During their battle she'd clearly seen the flaws in his style. The only ninjutsu she'd seen him use was the shadow clone technique, and his taijutsu was a mess. It was inefficient and flashy. That wasn't to say that he wasn't any good. Strip her of her tools, and Haku had little doubt that she'd be hard-pressed to keep up with him. Technically her style was superior, but he had superior strength and stamina, as well as the passion for taijutsu that she lacked. Haku utterly despised pure hand-to-hand combat. She'd rather use weapons or close-range ninjutsu than use taijutsu any day of the week. It was apparent to her that he was undertrained. Why though was the question she had to ask herself. From what she'd seen so far, Naruto's training was a joke, but she failed to get the punchline. She suppressed a snort. She was reminded of something Zabuza-san had once said to her in passing. When you have a problem, you solve it. Now, when he'd said that he'd been speaking in reference to an especially tenacious hunter nin, and his method of solving the problem had been to split the man from groin to scalp, but still, the point did stand. She had a problem, and she was going to solve it. There are several things I must handle in the village, Naruto-kun, she said. I was going to ask if you'd accompany me, but I have no wish to disturb your training. I will be in town most of the day. Naruto's eyes widened and he began to make warding gestures with his hands. It's okay, I can just train later. Haku smiled, though not with complete honesty. She felt a bit guilty about manipulating the boy. Naruto was lonely and he held on to moments of companionship like a drowning man gulps for air. Her only comfort was that by doing so she'd be furthering both their interests. But Naruto-kun, if you skip your training then how will you become strong enough to protect me? She asked him, playfully. Naruto blushed and scratched the back of his head, a bit embarrassed but emboldened by the closeness implied in the remark. Well, he trailed off, seemingly unsure of what to say. Haku parsed her lips and rubbed her chin, making a show of thinking before smiling once again, this time more honestly. I've got it, she said. Naruto grinned. So you gonna teach me a cool new jutsu or something? Actually, Haku replied yes. Naruto's eyes went wide as saucers and his jaw dropped. He actually looked something like a fish. He was utterly speechless. The look in his eyes was telling though. Before, the offer of a day's companionship was like a breath to a drowning man, but this was something that went above any beyond even that. I seemed like he was having trouble understanding that someone would actually say yes to that question. There was total love and admiration in those eyes, and it angered her. Was he so neglected in his training that the simple offer of a new jutsu was something that meant so much to him? Regaining his wits, Naruto started to run and bounce around her like a hyperactive child, which in some ways he still was. She fought back a laugh. He must have been a terror as a student. She paused for a moment, and looked at the boy sadly. Her eyes had an immediate effect on Naruto. His energy stilled itself, and he frowned slightly. Are you alright, Haku? She fought down what she really wanted to ask and instead decided that she needed to keep to business. Naruto-kun, what element are you attuned to? Naruto blinked, obviously confused. Elemental what? This infuriated her. Elemental affinity was so rudimentary, so easy to test for, and so critical for a ninja's development that it was downright ridiculous that he didn't know his. I don't have any bloodlines or anything, he continued. I can't use ice or anything like you do. Haku resisted the urge to grit her teeth. What was that cyclopean scarecrow teaching the boy? What confused her though was his admission that he didn't have a Kekkei Genkai. Then what was his mysterious power, and the source of his other abilities? How can you perform proper jutsu without knowing? She wondered aloud. The Uchiha boy has his Ketan jutsu, so you have to have been taught how to use elemental chakra. Sasuke's known that jutsu for like ever, Naruto replied. So what are you talking about? Most ninja have an elemental affinity, she said. A few have more than one. Out of those few, some have the natural ability to mix their affinities and create new elements. My elemental natures are wind and water, but I have the natural ability to combine them to create ice. Naruto blinked. Does that mean you can only use elemental jutsu that you have an affinity for? No, she replied. It just makes creating them much easier. Using your elemental affinity is easy once you've learned how. It literally is second nature to you. Much of the work is instinctive, and your chakra is able to naturally form that element with only minimal effort. Using an element that isn't your affinity is more difficult because you have to concentrate on reshaping the chakra. It takes more effort and uses more chakra. Because of this, most ninja tend to stick to the jutsu they already know. She paused for a moment. That is why I asked you your elemental affinity. Besides my Hayatan abilities, I know a great number of Suiton Jutsu and Futon Jutsu. If either of them are your elemental nature, I believe I could teach you a lot. If you're another elemental type, I could teach you a little, but I'm afraid I won't be much help. Naruto's face fell. Does that mean you're not going to teach me an awesome new jutsu? Haku smiled warmly. No, I can still teach you a jutsu, it just won't be as impressive. Naruto's eyes lit back up. Great. So what are you going to teach me? Naruto, Haku asked. If I may ask, what has your sensei been teaching you? Well, he taught us how to stick to trees, Naruto said. She frowned deeply. I was taught that when I was 7. Whoa, seriously? Naruto asked wide-eyed. You must be really strong. No, just properly taught. Has he even started teaching you water walking? No, Naruto admitted. How long has he been your sensei? Naruto sighed. A few months. And all he's taught you is tree climbing? She asked, almost not believing her ears. Of all the lazy useless, it made her want to scream. She frowned and shook her head, speaking as much to herself as to him. You'll never become Kage at this rate. I know, and it sucks. Naruto exclaimed. He glared at her. The look of betrayal in his eyes was painful to behold. I thought you're different, but now you're telling me I'm a dobe too. No, she said, putting her hand on the shorter ninja's shoulder. You're not a dobe. I think you have the potential to be the strongest ninja in the world. Really? He asked, the anger and frustration in his voice vanishing instantly as if it had been cast to the wind. Haku smiled. Yes, I do. You just need to be properly taught. He looked hopefully at Haku. So does that mean you're offering to teach me? Yes. Yes, I am, Naruto-kun. I'll teach you whatever I can. Naruto's smile as infectious. Awesome. So we're going to start with that jutsu, right? She nodded. His smile grew even more. The look on his face only cemented her intention. She'd never seen anyone as happy as Naruto seemed to be right now. It reminded her of the drunken oaths they'd sworn to each other. She promised to help him achieve his dream, and he swore to protect her as one of his precious people. He was strong, and she believed in him. I warn you now though that you have a great deal to learn. Your fighting style is very sloppy. Naruto frowned and looked at his feet. Unlike before, he wasn't taking offense to her observations, rather he was listening to them, and while he didn't seem to like it, he was paying attention to them. Well, yeah, he admitted, a little reluctantly. I had to teach myself. That surprised her. A self-taught ninja from one of the 5 main ninja villages? I thought Konoha had a ninja academy. It does, but few of the instructors had the time for me, Naruto said, scowling. I tried to learn the forms everybody else did, but when I needed help, nobody really gave me any, except Iruka-sensei, but well, Naruto sighed. He tried his best, but he still had a whole class and all. Haku grimaced. It was worse than she thought. Were all of your instructors like that? Naruto nodded sadly. Pretty much. Mizuki-sensei gave me some time, but considering he tried to kill me, I don't think that counts. Haku blinked. Then she blinked again. What the? You're telling me one of your teachers tried to kill you? Yeah, Naruto admitted. I failed the Genin exam 3 times. They always asked us to do Bunshin no Jutsu, but that's my worst technique. After I failed, he told me there was another secret test. Haku grimaced. She didn't like where this was going. He told me that all I had to do was steal the forbidden scroll of sealing from the Hokage Tower and learn a jutsu from it, so I did. He grinned. I even knocked out the old man with my awesome original jutsu. Huh? Haku blinked. Did she just hear him right? Did a genin have a jutsu so powerful that he could bring down a kage? Show me this jutsu, she demanded. Naruto grinned. Oiroke no jutsu. In a burst of smoke, Naruto was replaced with a beautiful girl with long silky hair, generous curves, and not a stitch of clothing. In fact, the only thing protecting her modesty at all was a few whiffs of smoke that actually seemed to be more strategically placed to draw attention to her assets than to hide them from view. Haku felt her eyebrow twitch slightly. So, the Hokage was a pervert, and Naruto defeated him by flashing him. If she ever needed something with which to blackmail a Kage, this was it. What a tasteless technique. Naruto giggled like the kind of shallow, air-headed civilian girl who liked to stalk her when she dressed as a boy and blew her a kiss. It made her skin crawl. Tasteless, but effective. With a poof of smoke, Naruto changed back and grinned. Pretty cool, huh? Haku frowned. Part of her wanted to smack him up the back of the head for coming up with such a perverse jutsu, but she had a feeling that this was one of those cases where if it was stupid and it worked, it wasn't stupid. Just never expect her to use it in the field. The idea of flashing her enemies into submission simply didn't appeal to her. Please continue the story, she said, not wanting to discuss the technique anymore. Naruto nodded. Okay. So I got the scroll and started to study it. A few hours later Iruka-sensei showed up and asked me what I was doing. I told him, then Mizuki-sensei showed up and Naruto trailed off. He bit his lip and looked uncomfortable for a moment. He continued, but by the tone of his voice she had a feeling he was leaving something out. Mizuki-sensei tried to kill us. Iruka-sensei got hurt protecting me, so I used the technique I learned from the scroll, Taiju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and kicked Mizuki-sensei's butt. He smiled. After that, Iruka-sensei told me to close my eyes, and when I opened them I was a genin. Haku blinked. Hold on, you're telling me you learned the Kinjutsu version of a Jonin-level jutsu in only a couple of hours? Yeah. Pretty cool, right? And they call you a dobe? He nodded. Idiots. Naruto beamed. Thanks, Haku. She frowned and looked over at the boy. Naruto, what did this Mizuki teach? Taijutsu mostly. Why? She grimaced. No wonder. Naruto looked at her in confusion. No wonder what? She crossed her arms and scowled. Please do not take this the wrong way, but your taijutsu is sloppy. Naruto grimaced for a moment, opened his mouth to retaliate, but after a moment snapped it shut and looked at Haku in annoyance before asking, What do you mean? I thought I was pretty good. Mizuki-sensei always complimented me on my skills, the same Mizuki-sensei who tried to kill you. Naruto blushed. Well, when you say it like that, I see your point. She nodded with a grim look on her face. I believe he sabotaged your efforts by intentionally teaching you the wrong way to do things. Naruto blinked. But that's where I got all my best grades and Mizuki-sensei wasn't the one testing us in taijutsu. Haku nodded. I believe that is due to your own natural aptitude. I have seen you fight, and you are strong and fast, with impressive stamina and an unpredictable fighting style. Your own innate ability makes you a dangerous opponent. The problem is that your fundamentals are deeply flawed, and this lowers your effectiveness greatly. As much as it pains me to say this, I'm going to have to teach you the basics of taijutsu. Naruto blinked. Why does it pain you to say that? I thought you wanted to teach me. Oh, I do, she replied. It's just that I dislike taijutsu. I am not incompetent, I just have little natural talent for it. I'm a ninjutsu specialist. Oh. He blinked. So what jutsu are you going to teach me? She paused for a moment of thought then nodded. If he needed the basics, she'd start with the basics. I will teach you a basic technique taught to all Kirinin. It is technically a Suiten technique, but it is simple enough that it can be done without using elemental nature. You've seen this technique before. It is the technique that Zabuza-san used against your sensei, the Kirigakyu no Jutsu. Awesome. Naruto grinned. If it can work against Kakashi-sensei's Sharingan, then it'll sure work against that bastard Sasuke's. Unfortunately, I am unable to demonstrate it for you. Haku blushed. I'm still out of chakra. Naruto shrugged. It's alright. I've already seen it done. Good, I just didn't want you to be disappointed. I will show you the hand signs and tell you what to do. Alright? Naruto grinned. Yeah. Haku took a deep breath and began. She stood up straight and, leaving her index and middle fingers extended up on both hands, with the right hand held with her fingers level with her chin, while the left is held into the air. As you can see, it uses two half-ram seals. Right hand held with your fingertips to your chin while the other is held at full upwards extension. It works by using your chakra to increase the local humidity by drawing out the surrounding water and changing the localized temperature gradient by rapidly cooling in order to create a thick blinding fog. Do you understand? Naruto paused for a moment and nodded. So I do those hand sighs, draw out some water and cool down the air to make it fog up. She nodded. Yes, alright. This'll be easy, Databeo. With a manic grin on his face Naruto formed the hand signs. Kirigakyu no Jutsu. Haku blinked in surprise as the entire world went completely white. She'd seen some pretty thick mists created before. It had been Zabuza's favorite technique and her dual elemental nature strengthened both the water gathering and atmospheric cooling aspects of the jutsu, but this was just ridiculous. She could barely see her hands in front of her face. Naruto? She called out, stepping forward in the direction that he'd been in. Are you still there? Yeah, Haku-chan, he replied. I think I used too much chakra. Naruto, are you still maintaining the technique? Yeah, I think so. Haku sighed and shook her head. Stop. It should dissipate momentarily. Oh. Naruto replied. Okay, she sighed and crossed her arms, waiting for it to fade. Naruto, we really need to work on your control. I guess so. It's probably why you can't do a simple clone. Bunshin no Jutsu requires a decent amount of chakra control. If you're all power and no control, you're going to overload the technique. She paused. When the mist fades, I want you to use the technique. Oh man! Naruto whined. I suck at that technique. Haku raised an eyebrow. Shouldn't that be reason enough for you to improve it? But I already know how to make shadow clones. Naruto said, why do I need stupid, regular clones? Haku shrugged. Regular clones are insubstantial. Being hit won't destroy them. Yeah, but they can't actually do anything. They draw attention off of your real clones. If you had a few regular clones for every shadow clone, the enemy wouldn't know what to aim for, so your shadow clones would last long. Besides, if seeing hundreds of you is intimidating, what would thousands be like? Wow. You're right. I never thought of it that way. I still hate that technique though. Haku smiled. She had a feeling she could motivate him. Let's make a deal. If your control improves to the point that you can create a single perfect clone, I'll teach you a cool new jutsu, one that is very useful but requires a great deal of control to use. Oh? What jutsu? Haku smiled. Hook. Line. Shunshin no jutsu. Cool. Naruto exclaimed. I'll master it in no time, Databeo. Haku grinned like a Hashigaki. Sinker. So, Haku? Yes, Naruto? Do you have any tips for me? She sighed. Just try and make as many clones as possible using as little chakra as you can and work your way down from there. Oh. He paused. Haku? Yes, Naruto? Shouldn't the mist have cleared up by now? She frowned. Yes. It should have. It normally cleared up in just a couple of minutes if that, and even now she was barely able to make him out through the fog, which was pretty incredible considering he was less than 10 feet away from her. Exactly how much chakra did you use? I don't know. I just put in as much as I could. Haku opened her mouth to reply but was cut off from a cry from the distance. Naruto-kun? Haku-san? It was Sakura. Are you out here? Hello? Sakura-chan. Naruto exclaimed. We're right here. Right where? She asked. This blinding fog is covering most of the town. What happened? Where is everyone? Haku winced. Oh yeah? She was going to get him started on water walking as soon as possible. They definitely had to work on his control. Databale. Chapter 4, Saying Your Goodbyes, by PsyckoSama. So, where are we going? Naruto asked Haku as the two entered town. Haku smiled sadly at him. It almost made him wince. It was strange. Her sad smile stung worse than the cold eyes of the villagers. She was one of the few people who'd ever truly opened her entire heart to him, and because of that he counted her among his most beloved friends. The idea of her being sad just made him feel like he'd failed on a personal level. He wanted her to be happy all the time because he believed she deserved nothing less. I have to put Zabuza-san's affairs in order, she replied in a low tone that made Naruto's heart twist. She just lost the closest thing she had to a father, and now she had to trouble herself by going through all the mess of burying him. He couldn't really understand that pain. He'd almost lost Irika and thought he'd lost Sasuke, but as important as they were to him, he knew that Zabuza had been Haku's world. He just couldn't understand the magnitude of her loss, but that didn't mean he couldn't sympathize with her unspoken plight. He could see it in her sad eyes how much this hurt her, and it shamed him that he'd been involved in Zabuza's death. She was far too good a person to go through this, and to have raised someone as kind as Haku, there had to be more to Zabuza than the demon of the mist. No monster could raise such a kind soul. Taking a moment to center himself, Naruto decided what he was going to do. He was going to help Haku in any way he could. For her sake he'd make sure that Zabuza wouldn't be forgotten, and that he'd be remembered for the person he really was. He'd do it for her sake. Before he promised that he'd keep her safe, but he knew damned well that you could be safe and miserable. She was his friend, and he'd protect not only her life, but her happiness. To do anything less would be paramount to abandoning her, and those who abandoned their friends were worse than trash. He'd never abandon his friends. He silently swore that he'd not only keep them safe, but that he could not and would not allow them to suffer the way he'd suffered in the past. As long as he lived, he would not allow them to be treated as if they were worthless, unwanted, unworthy, or forgotten. He'd shield them from the hell of loneliness with his very life if he had to. That was the promises of a lifetime. Databeo, Naruto-kun? Haku asked, looking at him, somewhat worried. What's wrong? Naruto blushed slightly. He'd been thinking so hard he must have zoned off into space. Nothing, Haku-chan. I was just a little distracted. Was thinking, that's all. Haku nodded in understanding. He said nothing. The silence between them was almost palpable. Naruto was unsure what to say, and he had a feeling that the same was true for Haku. It was rather awkward and felt really uncomfortable. Naruto hated pauses like this. He hated silence, really. If he spent any real time thinking about it, he'd probably admit it was why he talked so damned much. People think too much when they're quiet, and for someone with as many hidden doubts and resentments as him, the last thing he could afford to do emotionally was dwell on all of the failures and derogatory words of the past. It was downright smothering, to be completely honest. "So, Haku-chan?" he said, looking for something, anything to break the silence. "What are we doing first?" Haku's face fell, making Naruto want to kick himself. Hell, he was tempted to summon a shadow clone to do just that. If she looked sad before, now she looked completely miserable. "I am going to the local constabulary," she said softly. "I am going to inquire as to the condition of Zabuza-san's body." Naruto winced. No wonder she was so damned sad. She was only trying to retrieve the body of her dead father. Nothing upsetting there. Nope, nothing at all. Almost unconsciously, Naruto's hand snaked out and grasped Haku's. The girl looked at him with a moment in surprise, then smiled and squeezed tightly. He could see her tension relax slightly as a small smile came to her face. He couldn't help but smile that his simple presence was comforting her. That was good. He wouldn't let his friend be alone at a time like this. If she needed a human safety blanket, he was happy to provide. "Let's go, Haku-chan," he said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. She nodded and together the two began into the village. The village itself was still winding back up after the unexpected lull caused by Naruto's overpowered hidden mist technique. In fact, there was still a thin fog overhanging the town, though Naruto wasn't quite sure of how much of that was him, and how much was just the normal morning weather. The region was normally pretty warm, but it still got a little foggy in the morning. Most noticeable though was the people. They seemed different. Gone was the shrunken posture, the almost palpable aura of hopelessness. They were standing taller and walking with pride. They were no longer looking down in shame and self-loathing, but instead wherever he passed their eyes seemed to be following him. It made him feel uncomfortable. He was used to the cold eyes of the villagers following him wherever he went, but these eyes, he realized, were different. They were not full of contempt and disgust. These eyes were warm and inviting, full of friendly admiration. They were all looking at him the same way Tsunami had. His eyes went wide and he paused in his step, drawing an inquisitive glance from Haku as realization seeped into his mind. They were looking at him the same way the people of Konoha looked at the Hokage. He had to ask himself the question, because he couldn't just simply believe it to see it. Was this the way people looked at a hero? "Are you alright, Naruto-kun?" Haku asked him with worry in her voice. Still stunned, Naruto couldn't find his voice to respond. He slowly nodded, and after a moment managed to say, "I'm fine." His voice was small and difficult to hear, but he meant it. He really meant it. Haku smiled and looked about for a moment, then with a slight blush on her face looked back down to him. "Naruto-kun?" "Yes, Haku-chan?" he replied as his voice returned to him in strength. "Do you know where the Constabulary is located?" Naruto blinked. That was an honest surprise. He'd expect a ninja like Haku, who'd had plenty of time to scout out the town, to know where it was. "Nope, I'm surprised that you don't. Zabuza-san said it wasn't important." Haku shrugged. "When we arrived they were effectively defunct." Naruto nodded. Constables were volunteer civil law enforcement, nothing like Konoha's defunct military police or the ANBU. Until Gato died, he guessed that they'd all had other things to worry about, like feeding their kids. "Let's ask somebody then," Naruto said with a smile. Pulling her behind him, he walked over to an old woman who was busily selling fish at the side of the street. He guessed an old woman like her would probably know the area very well. As he approached the stand, the various shoppers stepped to the side and bowed to him in deference. Standing behind the counter of her cart, the old woman bowed deeply to him and met his startled eyes with a wide smile on her face. "How may I help you, Naruto-sama?" He was almost stunned into silence. "You know my name?" he all but whispered. "How?" The woman smiled radiantly, and for a moment, he could see the faded beauty of her youth in her joyful face. "You're a hero." "How could I not?" Naruto opened his mouth to respond but couldn't. He just choked. Before he wasn't sure, but now he knew. This really was the way people acted towards a hero. Even more, he realized that these people didn't see him for the demon fox in his belly, for the unfortunate circumstances of his birth. They saw him for his own actions. They saw him for him, and they not only judged him to be worthy of respect, they judged him to be someone worth admiring. They looked up to him. To him. He couldn't believe it. It was just too good to be true, but it was. It really was. For the first time in his life, Naruto knew not only what it was like to be truly accepted, but to be truly loved. Not just by one person, but by everyone. He had to fight back tears as this realization hit him almost as hard as Irika's deceleration in the forest, while he fought Mizuki. Naruto clenched his fist and smiled widely and honestly, probably more so than he'd done on any occasion before or after he'd been made a genin. A few rebellious tears made their way down his cheek and he looked right back at the old woman, his eyes almost manic in their intensity and filled with a strength and pride he never before felt and didn't know he even possessed. "Hey, Bachan?" he asked. "Which way to the constable's office?" The woman's eyebrow peaked, but if she was thinking anything, she didn't say it. "It's 2 streets down, right off to the left. Look for the building with the red roof." "Thanks," he exclaimed. The woman stood thoughtfully for a moment, then asked, May I be so bold as to ask why you're going there, Naruto-sama? Naruto fought back a frown for a moment. He knew old grandmas like this loved their gossip, and had a feeling she was looking for something to chat about. He knew how much they liked to rag on him back home and how far even the slightest insult could travel, getting more and more blown out of proportion every time it was retold, but it did give him an idea. He beat down a foxy grin and his old pranking instincts came to head. Even though he never said it aloud, he promised Haku that he'd make sure Zabuza wouldn't be forgotten, and this was his chance. We're going to see about getting Zabuza a proper burial, he replied. Haku's grip tightened to almost painful levels and he could feel her killing intent leaking out as the old woman snorted. Why bother? He was just another one of Gato's dogs. No, he wasn't! Naruto exclaimed. He died a hero. What? The old woman asked as the crowd muttered around him. Inside his mind, Naruto cackled gleefully. Now he had their attention. Zabuza was set up. Gato lied to him and used him. He talked him into doing his dirty work and was going to kill him when he was done. Even though he was my enemy, I respect him because he was a strong ninja. He died telling Haku-chan here how she was like a daughter to him, and much he loved her and stuff. That brought all eyes to Haku, and she tensed up under the harsh glare of the crowd. He felt guilty about putting her through it, but it was only for a moment. He said she was like his daughter, and he wanted her to be strong and happy, he replied. Then Gato showed up and said that Zabuza was a worthless pawn, and how this was all just a setup so we'd bump each other off. So Haku here shut him up. She killed him with a single really awesome blow and avenged him. If it wasn't for Zabuza and his last words, she wouldn't have had the drive to kill Gato, and I wouldn't have been able to pull up the strength to kick all his thugs' asses. If I'm a hero, then Haku's a hero, and Zabuza's one too. The old woman frowned slightly. I see. After a moment of thought, her frown faded to an impassive glance, and after taking the girl in for a moment, an understanding smile came to her face. I apologize for my harsh words, Haku-sama. I would like to give you my sympathy for your loss. Many of us have lost loved ones to Gato's corruption, and I believe that it is only fitting that he died by the hands of one who has suffered as we have. Thank you very much. She bowed deeply. Naruto looked up to Haku. He could see the confusion on her face and felt the tension in her grip. She was obviously as bewildered as he'd been moments before. After a pregnant pause, she bowed to the older woman. Not nearly as deeply but still deep enough to convey respect. I thank you for your kind words. With that said, Haku began to walk quickly in the direction of the Constabulary, all but dragging him behind her. After a few minutes, once they were clear of the crowd and people's attention was no longer focused entirely on them, she turned about and glared at Naruto, pulling her hand away from his. What were you doing? She demanded. Her voice was tense, filled with confusion and a bit of anger at the perceived betrayal. Not only have you endangered my life by airing my secrets for all to hear, but you paraded my loss before these civilians. Why? Naruto smiled widely at her. It hurt to have someone he liked look at him like that, but he understood why and he was sure she'd forgive once he explained it. Now Zabuza won't be forgotten, or remembered as a monster. Now he'll always be one of the heroes who beat Gato. Haku blinked as her jaw went agape. She laughed shallowly and closed her eyes, smiling and shaking her head. Opening them, she looked at Naruto and pulled him into a tight hug. He flushed crimson as she held him so close to her body for so long. Really, it was all he could do not to get excited. He had to struggle to keep the fact that he was being squeezed like a plushie by a hot, older kunoichi who he'd seen naked out of his mind. Last thing he wanted was to get slugged as a pervert because some parts of his body wouldn't obey his brain. Thank you, she whispered. Pulling away, his new friend smiled at him with the same radiance he'd already learned to treasure. I am sorry that I was upset at you, Naruto-kun. Now I understand why you did it. That was a very kind thing. Not many people would try and honor the memory of an enemy like that. Thank you? Hey, if he was able to raise someone like you, he couldn't be all bad. Naruto grinned. Haku smiled sadly. He was a complicated man, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled warmly at her. You have to tell me about him sometime. I will, she replied softly. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Thank you for being so kind. Naruto blushed and scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. You're welcome, Haku-chan. Pakkun was not a happy pug. Kakashi told him to follow these two and he'd do it. Like it or not, he'd do it. Honestly though, he'd rather be sleeping. In fact, that is exactly what he'd been doing until he'd been summoned and set on this fool's errand. Follow them around. Kakashi had said to make sure she didn't do anything to threaten the boy or do anything too questionable. Personally, he thought that was a load of bullshit. From the smell of them, mating was on their minds. Maybe not at the front of their minds, but definitely in the back. He could smell their hormones from across the room. Not surprising when you consider how close they got the night before, at least from what Kakashi told him. He just hoped they didn't sneak off and do it while he was on their tail. He'd be obliged to observe, and there were some things he just never wanted to see. Humans fucking might not be on the top of that list, but it was damned close. Slowly he moved to follow as the pair entered the Constabulary, deftly ducking into the shadows to remain out of view while making sure to stay within earshot. View wasn't the best, but from the sound of things the girl was pretty skilled and he was under orders to avoid detection. Hey! If it's not the hero of the day! The man inside the building began once he laid eyes on Kakashi's colorblind genin. I'm Kenji. How can I help you? There was an awkward pause before the female replied. I would like to ask about the body of Momochi Zabuza. What? Hey, wait a minute. You're that girl who killed Gato, right? I heard you were like his daughter or something. Huh? Naruto asked in surprise. You heard about that already? Yeah, one of the guys told me right before you got here, Kenji replied. Wow, rumors travel pretty fast around here, Naruto observed. Small town, he said in a flippant tone. Anyways, I take it the girl wants to see the body? Yes, Haku said in a sad voice. It made Pakkun feel a little down. He just knew that was going to be intruding on something very private, and for no good reason. Kakashi definitely owed him for this one. This kind of intrusion was worth at least 2 bones, and by that he didn't mean just any bones but those really tasty special smoked ones that the Inuzuka make. Alright, that Kakashi guy said that the body wasn't to be disturbed. The constable paused. But since you're going to just be looking at it, I don't think it'll count as a disturb. Thank you. Pakkun frowned as the two were led into the back and scampered forward trying to keep silent and out of sight while at the same time staying close enough to hear them. Thus he was none too happy when they ended at a large freezer door. Great, they were keeping the body in a meat locker. That meant the only way he could hear them was to get inside with them. Wonderful. Just wonderful. Slowly he watched as the constable opened the door and pointed inside. Listen, Zabuza's is the only body left. He hung the rest from the pier this morning. I'll let you stay in there for as long as you want. You can leave anytime you want. Thank you, Kenji-san, Haku replied. Hey, anything for the girl who put that son of a bitch down. The kunoichi smiled slightly and took a deep breath and entered behind Naruto as Kenji opened the door for them. Taking this as his only opportunity, Pakkun slipped in behind them before the door could be closed. Hoping that he wasn't seen, he quickly took cover behind a large box sitting by the entrance. He winced slightly as he heard a muffled "Was that a dog?" Nah. Must be seeing things behind him as the door shut. Inside the room was a converted meat locker with wooden tables lined up against the wall. It smelled like blood and from the looks of it had recently been more filled than it was now, with fresh stains on the tables and floor, with a pile of bloody sheets lying to the side. On one of the tables there was still a covered corpse sitting on the table with a sheet pulled over it. Gee, guess who that could be? Haku tensed and Naruto held her hand and looked at her as the two approached the body. Are you sure you're okay? Naruto asked her with worry. I have to do this, she replied. Taking a deep breath, Haku pulled the sheet down and choked, almost losing her footing. With tears trailing down her face, she clutched to Naruto's arm for support. Together they stood for what felt like an inordinate amount of time as the girl vented her bottled-up emotions over the corpse of her dead mentor. Unable to put up with it any longer, Pakkun sighed deeply and looked away. Oh yeah, Kakashi definitely owed him those bones. Moments like this should be held in private. The poor girl didn't need him intruding on her grief. Shaking his head in annoyance, he almost missed what the girl said next. Naruto-kun? Haku asked. I would like some time alone, please. Alright, Haku-chan. Are you sure you'll be alright? I'll be fine. Naruto nodded and Pakkun watched him walk out and closed the door behind him. Then, he felt a chill run down his back and slowly turned around to look dead into the eyes of one extremely pissed-off kunoichi. Oh. Haku didn't even waste words replying to him. She simply reached down and lifted him by the scruff of the neck and brought him to eye level. Silently, Pakkun cursed his own instincts and his body reflexively went limp under the human's grip. You're one of Kakashi's Niken, she said, not asked. I remember you from the bridge. Pakkun gulped and realized that she really was her father's daughter, as her killer intent added an almost palpable sense of dread to the already thick tension that hung to the situation. He really hoped she wasn't going to take some of her frustration out on him. He'd helped hold Zabuza when Kakashi killed him, so it wasn't like he was completely without fault, after all. Yeah? He winced. Oh, great response. Why are you following me? She said coolly as the temperature of the room began to drop. Oh, forget this shit. He wasn't going to deal with scary ice chick any more than he had to. I was told to keep an eye on Naruto and stay out of sight. She frowned. Do I look like a fool? She asked with faux sweetness. I want you to remind Kakashi-san that I am not a prisoner, nor do I appreciate being spied on. She dropped him and glared. If I see you following me again, I'll be making basantang for dinner. Am I clear? Pakkun gulped. Right now she smelled like frozen death, and he had a feeling she really wasn't kidding. Okay, you know what? Screw Kakashi. He wasn't going to end up in a soup. He simply gave her a quick nod and banished himself, vanishing in a poof of ninja smoke. There weren't enough bones in the world for this shit. Haku frowned as she walked beside Naruto. She'd thought she'd been ready to see Zabuza's body, but she'd been wrong. Shinobi were supposed to be masters of their emotions, but she'd been unable to contain her sorrow. She'd lost her cool, and while showing weakness in front of Naruto hadn't been embarrassing as he wouldn't judge her, that damn mutt just had to ruin everything. She looked over to Naruto, who smiled at her. She gave him a weak smile in return. She was still disturbed, but at least she was in good company. Naruto was a good person, and while their oaths to aid one another had been made in a moment of foolish drunkenness, she didn't regret it. Any of it, actually. She'd never been that close to a boy, and while he was a bit young, she couldn't help but turn red. She got goosebumps thinking about the things they'd done in that bath. She was glad that his sensei had stopped them, though. While it would have been pleasurable, she'd have felt like an idiot in the morning, and really, what if she'd gotten pregnant? She repressed a shudder. There was no way she was ready for that. She barely knew what she was going to do with herself now that Zabuza was gone. How the hell would she have been able to take care of a child? You alright, Haku? Naruto asked. He pressed his hand to her forehead as a worried look crossed his face. You have a fever or something? She couldn't help but turn an even brighter shade of red. This was cute, but humiliating. It's getting worse, he said, his face creased with a deep frown. We should get you to a doctor. No! She cut in, feeling even more embarrassed than before. She sighed. I'm just thinking. Naruto blinked. Oh. He paused for a moment, then looked back to her. You think we could get something to eat? I'm getting kinda hungry. Haku smiled slightly. She was hungry too. Recovery from even a minor case of chakra exhaustion like this always left her absolutely ravenous, and there was a little sushi stand they'd walked past about 10 minutes back that was beckoning to her. Still, first things first. Maybe a little later, Naruto. There's something I need to do first. Something that she was damned glad that dog wasn't around to observe. She was still technically a noob, and while she trusted Naruto and felt a connection between them, she couldn't say the same about Konohagakure no Sato. Even with their reputation for being the softest of the hidden villages, they were still a hidden village. A mercenary village run by professional thieves, spies, assassins, and murderers. The only thing she could absolutely count on was Konoha looking out for its own interests, so she had to look out for hers. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, she started leading Naruto towards the loading docks that had once belonged to Gato. Normally, Gato's guards kept a harsh order in this part of town, but with the criminal's death and the defeat of his bandit army, the people of Wave had obviously been emboldened. It was clear to see that the warehouses of the Gato Corporation had been looted. Even now there were people still sorting through the once-packed warehouses, dragging goods both mundane and exotic. She had to admit that she was somewhat amused to see an elderly woman walking past, carrying out a bag of rice under one arm and an exotic tapestry from across the seas that probably was worth more than her house under the other. It was strange, and a bit foolish. They'd have done much better selling these goods than keeping the money. But she could not begrudge the people their victory. If having a 50,000 Rio rug somehow allowed that old woman to emotionally recover from what had been done to them, then it was money well spent. So what are we doing? Naruto asked as they walked past one of the many ransacked warehouses. Haku bit her lip. She was dreading this. While she didn't trust Konoha, Kakashi's treatment of her had still been relatively fair. She knew this could change it. Most people were willing to give you a break once, but tended to draw back once you went behind their back. Still, she had a moral obligation to do this. Then there was the question of Naruto. How would he take it? She was going to be asking him to keep a secret from his commander. She sighed. She really should have left him behind. Maybe it wasn't too late. Naruto, maybe you should go back to Tsuna's, she said. Naruto blinked and drew back. She could see the betrayal in his eyes and it hurt. What? Why? He demanded. I have something I have to do. Naruto frowned. You don't trust me? No, I do, she replied. I just have to do something that Kakashi-san might not approve of, and I know he's going to order you to tell him everything we've done today. Naruto blinked and smiled. Well, all you have to do is ask me to keep it secret and I will. I don't want you to keep a secret from your commander, Haku replied with a frown of her own. It could get you in trouble. Naruto smiled knowingly. Kakashi-sensei taught us that ninja who disobey their orders are trash, but those who betray their friends are worse than trash. I won't tell anyone your secrets, even if it kills me, Databeo. Haku couldn't help but go slightly agape. That was one of the strangest nindos she'd ever heard. She'd always been taught that a ninja's role was simply as a tool. They were to follow their orders without exception, but this was different. The idea of looking after your friends first appealed to her own nindo that becoming strong came from having precious people to protect. She had to admit to herself that her opinion of the one-eyed Jonin had just risen a great deal. She'd remember it. What really stunned her though was Naruto's promises. He'd already made it very clear to her that he didn't break his word once given, and in the world of the Shinba that was a very loaded statement. Ninja can and will kill you to get to your secrets, and a promise to keep them unto death was very serious indeed. All right, Naruto-kun, she replied after a moment's thought. I believe you. His smile was wide and infectious. She couldn't help but smile with him. He was a good person, a rarity in their trade. So what are we looking for? He asked her, cocking his head slightly to the left. Some friends of mine, she replied calmly. It wasn't quite the full truth, but it was still truth. I want to make sure they know that nothing happened to me. That, on the other hand, was the full truth. Last thing she needed was those idiots getting it into their head to try and rescue her from a Jonin and getting themselves killed. So, how do we find them? Naruto grinned. Just tell me what they look like and I'll find them right away. Kaiga Bunshin no Jutsu. With the characteristic explosion of ninja smoke, the single Naruto before her was replaced with 10. Haku smiled to herself. No need for clones, Naruto-kun. They'll be pretty easy to spot. I'll know when we're close. You just had to look for the largest commotion. Chances were good that they'd be standing dead center in the middle of it. Suddenly there was a nearby crash followed by a steady stream of screaming and cursing. And that would be them now, Haku replied. In a second explosion of ninja smoke, the 10 Narutos were once again one. He looked up at her, obviously not quite convinced. Are you sure? Oh yeah, she said curtly, absolutely no doubt in her mind. The two followed the sound of the commotion to its source. It was relatively easy to find. Inside a small dockyard they found two middle-aged men arguing while a third hopped around on his foot yelling and screaming in pain. There was a large box laying on the ground. As they approached they could hear the ranting tones of their conversation. "Karai, you knucklehead!" exclaimed a harsh, angry-looking man with one of the worst haircuts that either of them had ever seen. "Look what you just did! You just broke Rariai's foot! Come on, Mao!" His fat, bald companion cried out pitifully, trying to stem his anger. "The box was wet and my hand slipped. I didn't mean to drop it. I'm a victim of circumstance. I'll show you circumstance," replied the one with the bowl cut. "I'll murder ya." He stepped forward menacingly and raised his fist, getting ready to strike the other. "Actually, I think my foot's feeling better." "Shut up, you!" Mao exclaimed before slamming his boot down onto the Rariai's injured foot, perpetuating a new round of howling. Turning back he reached out and grabbed Kariai's nose and began to twist violently. Slowly Naruto glanced over to Haku with an uncharacteristically dry expression. "Are these your friends?" Haku sighed. Unfortunately. They could go on like this for hours, and she wanted to get it over quick. She was hungry and she'd seen a sushi stand back a ways with her name on it. "Mo Rariai, Kariai, front and center," she snapped out harshly, in a stern, authoritarian tone that seemed totally unlike her, causing Naruto to jump back in surprise. In a blur of movement the three middle-aged men were knelt before her on one knee, and in an explosion of ninja smoke replaced by three older teens dressed in Kiri ninja garb. "Hi, Haku-sama," they answered in one voice. "Haku-chan, who are these guys?" Naruto asked her, drawing back defensively. He was obviously a bit put off by the idea of even more nuke-nin. She honestly couldn't blame him. She would be. "They were Zabuza-san's genin team," Haku replied. "They followed him into exile. What Haku-sama's trying to say is that we were screwed either way, so we got while the getting was good," replied one of the twins sarcastically. Haku shut him up with a cold glare. She couldn't disagree with them though. It was true. Had they stayed loyal, Zabuza-san would have killed them, and even if they didn't, the Mizuki would have executed them as a matter of fact on account of their close relationship to Zabuza-san. "No Brows had a genin team?" Naruto asked, looking a bit appalled by the idea. Brow furrowed, he took them in. They were nothing special to look at, brown hair, brown eyes, average features. Two of them were identical twins while the third was too different to be a relation. The twins had soft, bland facial features and lazy brown eyes that weren't unlike the Hataki's, while the other had a more robust, but equally forgettable facial structure and a hairstyle much like the Uchiha's trademark duck butt. "Yeah, he did. As bad as it sounds, let me assure you, as bad as you think it was actually quite a bit worse," the non-twin remarked, getting a harsh glare of his own from Haku, which he met with an infuriating grin of his own. "I'm Rariai, by the way. These two are Mao and Kariai." Naruto smiled. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto." "So," Kariai asked, butting into the conversation. "Naruto was it? You're not going to try and cash our bounty, right?" Naruto blinked, a bit put off by the question. "No. You're Haku-chan's friends, of course not." "Great," Haku groaned. God, those three were not professional in the slightest. They could act like such stooges at times. "I have not debriefed you yet," Haku grumbled. "Before Zabuza-san died, he declared me his heir. That means you'll work for me now." "Oh, okay," Kariai said happily. "Hey, is it really a good idea to say all this in front of a leaf-nin?" Mao asked. "I mean, isn't he the enemy?" "No, they're not. Kakashi-san promised that they will take no action against me, and Naruto-kun has sworn to protect me." "Oh, sorry, Haku-sama," Mao blurted out. "Don't worry, we got everything and then some." Naruto glanced over at Haku and frowned. "Haku-chan, why weren't they on the bridge? They specialize in the more esoteric ninja arts." "What Haku-sama is trying to say is that we'd lose in a fight against a wet paper bag," Kariai chirped in before getting smacked upside the back of his head by his brother. "You're not that bad," Haku replied, putting her arms on her hips and scowling. They were far from the best fighters she'd ever seen. Out of the 7 of them, they'd been the worst, but they were still acceptable. Zabuza wouldn't have let them live otherwise. She sighed and shook her head, not wanting to get into this conversation. "Konoha has shown interest in my bloodline, so I am going to take up Kakashi's offer to join their village. And what if they're not interested in us? Then I will not abandon you." Haku smiled. "You're a trio of idiots." "Hey, but you're my idiots." "Your family?" Naruto smiled. "Don't worry, Kakashi-sensei's a bit perverted, but he's a good guy. He'll let you come too, Dadabayo." "Come on. Let's ask him. I'm sure he'll say yes." "Absolutely not," Kakashi said, crossing his arms. his tone brooking no argument. What? Naruto stood agate, as he was overcome by a mix of emotion, in this case a mixture of betrayal, sadness, and a small but festering amount of anger and outrage. But you have to. They have nowhere else to go. Kakashi drew his eyes across the three former Kirigenin, Haku, and then looked back down at his student and shook his head. Naruto-kun, it's not that I don't want to. I have no doubt they're good kids, but I can't. Haku I can because she has a unique bloodline which makes her valuable, but unless there's something you're holding back on me, these three have no exceptional talents or abilities that make them worth the rather severe political fallout that comes with adopting another nation's nuke. Shit. Rari, I cursed. So, you're not going to brutally kill us and cash in our heads for our pittance of a bounty, right? Kakashi snickered, making Naruto fight the urge to try and strangle his teacher. No, but I'm not going to protect you if any hunter nin show up, which I have no doubt they will be doing, soon. Haku slowly lifted herself to her feet. She looked over to Naruto and frowned sadly. Very well, then we will leave tomorrow. Kakashi stood up and nodded. Very well. That's your decision then. Good luck, Haku-san. Thank you, Kakashi-san, she replied quietly. Mao Rarii Karii. Come, we have to prepare to travel. She looked back to Naruto and said, I am sorry that I will not help you become Hokage. Naruto clambered to his feet in an instant. Haku was the first person who he'd ever met who treated him with kindness and friendship from the onset. She was his friend, and she couldn't go like this. It wasn't fair. Wait, don't go. I'll find a way so all of you can go to Konoha. Screw politics. He exclaimed desperately. In many ways Haku was the first person who was just nice to him without any reservations. Sure, he guessed that he could call Kiba, Choji and Shikamaru his friends, but they never played with him out of school. Hinata too, but she was a bit weird and got sick around him all the time. But Haku was the first person who was just outright nice for nice's own sake. Even when they were enemies she was still his friend. Naruto couldn't lose one of the only people who was simply kind to him. It was like handing a man dying of thirst in the desert a canteen, just to pull it away when he felt the first traces of moisture on his lips. It wasn't fair. Naruto-kun, I can't stay. These three are family. I can't abandon them, Haku said, with a sad smile on her face, but I believe in you, Naruto, and if anyone can figure out a way I think it's you. Naruto smiled and nodded. I'll figure out a way for the four of you to come home to Konoha. That's a promises. Haku nodded and gave him a kiss on the forehead. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Lucky bastard, Rarii muttered, catching a glare from Haku. What was that? Nothing, Haku-sama, didn't think so. Move. With that said the three filed out under the stern and somewhat scary gaze of Haku. As Mao passed by he looked over to Naruto and nodded. For what it's worth, kid, thanks for trying. Haku slowly followed them, and as she passed Naruto, she sadly said goodbye. Naruto on the other hand didn't. He just choked down his sorrow and gritted his teeth. This wasn't it. This wasn't goodbye. He'd find a way, and he already was getting a feeling how. Haku, wait, he asked. I need to know where you're going so I can tell you when I've figured out how you guys can come with. She paused and looked back. We have a safe house near the docks. Just look for the house with the blue tile roof. We'll probably be there for the next couple days. Then we're going to have to leave. Without another word said, she left, and as he watched Haku's shapely posterior leave through the door, he thought back to older memories of another shapely posterior, one he hadn't been old enough to appreciate at the time, the Hokage's secretary. Naruto knew that most people thought he was an idiot. Hell, he'd been told that to his face enough times. Tears came to his face, and his brain struggled to get a handle on the situation. Maybe he was an idiot, but that didn't matter, not here, and not now. He'd given his word and he'd keep it. He just had to ask himself, what would Jiji-chan do? What would a Hokage do in a situation like this? Before he'd entered the academy he'd spent most of his childhood in the Hokage's office. He'd spent much of it playing with the kindly old man. But he'd done much more than just ask him if he would try on his hat. He'd helped him sort paperwork while the old man explained to him the ancient traditions of Konoha and Hai no Kuni, and read him the law, explaining it so a child could understand it. He knew that somewhere, locked away in his memories, was the answer to the question. He just didn't have much time to think about it. Good thing that 100 heads were better than one. With a purposeful stride he stepped outdoors and looked defiantly at the sky. Uzumaki Naruto wouldn't lose. Not now, not when it mattered. He'd keep his word. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With a vast explosion of smoke and chakra, the clearing behind Tazuna's house was filled with an army. Stepping to its head like a commanding general, Naruto looked over the troops, all of whom were identical to himself. All right. We have to start brainstorming, he said. I want everyone to talk it over and think about it. There has to be some way of doing this. Hi. They responded as one. Naruto smiled grimly. Get to it, men. The army scattered into groups, each of which was going to try and think of a new way of dealing with the problem. At least most of it did. Off to the side a couple clones were chatting before turning back to him. Hey boss. One of them said, I think I might have it. Naruto looked over. Huh. Tell me what you have. The clone did, and Naruto smiled. This would work, and there was nothing that Kakashi could do about it. He just needed the help of his teammates to pull it off. Haku-sama? One of the twins asked as the four of them looked back at the manic orange army that stood in the back of Tsuna's house. Yes, Mao? Did that kid just pull like 100 Kage Bunshin out of his ass and not die? Yes, she replied. He nodded. Okay, just wanted to make sure my eyes were working right. Remind me never to piss that kid off. She closed her eyes and shook her head. Stop gawking and move, all of you. Hi Haku-sama. Chapter 5, Making Uzumaki, by PsyckoSama. Uchiha Sasuke sat silently at the table as he slowly chewed his food and considered the current events. He almost felt sorry for Naruto, almost. He wasn't going to lose any sleep over it, but he did think Kakashi was being a little harsh. The political windfall from taking in a genin team couldn't be much more severe than taking in a member of a lost bloodline. He snorted slightly and swallowed, mechanically picking up another piece of rice. Good afternoon, Sasuke-kun, shouted Sakura as she entered the small dining room. Quickly crossing the room, she attempted to gracefully descend upon the seating mat next to Sasuke. This would have gone better if she hadn't been half as eager to be at Sasuke's side. After almost bouncing out of her seat, she started to serve herself some of the rice, some scrawny vegetables that the villagers hoard like Kakashi with his Aika series, and some fish. All this time, chatting about various banal subjects to the object of her affection. It was times like this that Sasuke could not believe his misfortune. Sure, Naruto acted like a fool most of the time, but the results of the battle had showed Naruto towards having a lot of untapped potential. Sakura, on the other hand, seemed to lose half her vaunted IQ points when acting around him. For someone who had higher test scores than he did, she froze up like one of the Nara deer in front of a katan technique. The greatest consternation was that she could not read his body language to tell that he wanted to be left alone. He sometimes wondered if she was physically incapable of shutting up. Watching her mouth move, he gave her a slight nod as if to look like he was actually paying attention to her. If he didn't, she'd start to get irritable and act like a fool to attract his attention. As he placed another bite of rice into his mouth, it was not for the first time he wished that he had less annoying third teammate. The Hyuga would have been nice. She was meek, but she didn't talk endlessly. She was serious about being a ninja, and if they were on the same team, maybe Sasuke would have more chances to see her without that damned hoodie. He really hated that damned hoodie. An almost undetectable perverted smirk crossed his face, and he remembered the time he'd accidentally scorched her previous one to ruin, with a poorly aimed katan jutsu. She'd been forced to spend the rest of the day in her tight undershirt. It was true what they said, there was a true Hyuga blood limit, and it wasn't the Byakugan. He wished he could say the same about the women of the Uchiha clan, but the Uchiha females had for the most part been cursed with a tendency to have a petite, underdeveloped form. There had been exceptions true, such as his mother, but for the most part they looked like a pack of flat-chested Lolas well into adulthood. Absently, he considered what Kakashi told him the night before. His sensei was correct, he did have the responsibility to rebuild his clan first. His smirk grew slightly as he considered it. Yes, he needed to rebuild the Uchiha clan, rebuild it with as many girls as possible, and he needed to use this as an opportunity to combat that hateful lowly curse. If he could find some women who were thoughtful, soft-spoken, and blessed with good looks and bountiful assets, he'd be set. These qualifications of course removed both Ino and Sakura from any consideration whatsoever. No great loss that. It was almost too bad that Hinata was a Hyuga, and thus incompatible. Still, she was capable, attractive, and he had little doubt that if she and Naruto were on the same team it would have been better for everyone involved. He would have had more opportunity to look at those wonderful Hyuga breasts. Constant exposure Naruto's aggravatingly upbeat personality would have done wonders for her self-confidence, and maybe a girlfriend would have both given Naruto the attention he demanded constantly, hopefully both shutting him up and giving the idiot something better to do than to challenge him endlessly. Hell, even if it didn't, he'd much rather watch the pair make out in the background like a pair of overly hormonal civilians, than watch Naruto prostrate himself before Sakura, like some pathetic lost puppy and get kicked around for the effort. It was humiliating just to look at it. Sasuke was interrupted from his thoughts, as he heard the panel door behind him slide close. Looking back he saw Naruto standing in the doorway looking extremely focused and on task. It was a new look for his teammate, and he wondered what Naruto was thinking. Now, while he knew Naruto was an idiot he wouldn't discourage his planning skills. It had taken talent to pull off the Hokage monument prank, and he showed himself to be good at thinking on his feet against Zabuza the first time. Not that he'd ever admit it aloud. The day he gave verbal praise to the dobe would be the day he killed himself. Do you need something, Naruto? Sasuke asked coolly, intentionally putting on a disinterested air. Yeah, Naruto replied. I need a favor from both of you. Go away, Naruto, Sakura said in a condescending tone. Sasuke and I were having a discussion. Sasuke repressed the urge to snort contemptuously. Like hell they were. She was talking and he was restraining himself from knocking her unconscious. As Sakura spoke, Sasuke watched as the serious and focused look on Naruto's face was quickly replaced by a glare that seemed to flash spontaneously between anger and sadness. Oh hell, whatever the idiot wanted couldn't be any worse than the nightmare fuel that Sakura saw fit to spout out whenever they were in the same room. Unlike Sakura, who insisted on being a petty annoyance, Naruto could occasionally be entertaining. Give him long enough and he might even one day do something that would cross the threshold of amusement and actually become interesting. What do you need our help with, Naruto? He asked, dismissing Sakura out of hand. I need Sakura to write something down for me. Sakura scowled. Why can't you do it? My handwriting isn't good enough, and I don't know that many kanji, he replied bluntly. Besides, this is going to be official, so it wouldn't be appropriate if I did it myself. Official? What are you up to? Sakura demanded as she crossed her arms. Naruto bit his lip. I can't tell you because if you say no and go to Kakashi-sensei then I'm sunk, but I will tell you that it doesn't break any rules. Sasuke smirked. This was the day it seemed. This was starting to sound interesting. And what do you need me for? I need a noble witness, Naruto replied bluntly. Sasuke grunted aloud. Whatever Naruto was up to was serious. In fact, there were only a few things that he could even remember even required a noble witness. In fact, these days there was only one thing that even required it. Sasuke's eyes went wide. That was it. Naruto, you clever bastard. He couldn't help but chuckle. As long as he didn't screw up, Kakashi-sensei could suck eggs if he disagreed. Hell, the Hokage himself could bend over backwards and kiss his ass if he didn't like it. Hey, Naruto growled, glaring at Sasuke, obviously mistaking his amused chuckling for laughter at his expense. Sasuke just continued to chuckle and glanced over to Sakura. You will record what he dictates. She blinked. Okay, Sasuke-kun. Looking back to Naruto he added, and I will witness for you. He paused for a moment, and decided to ask the question that was nagging at him. How the hell do you know about that law anyways? I spent a lot of time playing with Hokage in his office when I was little, Naruto replied with a smile. He taught me a lot about the law. What are you two talking about, Sasuke? Questioned a confused Sakura. Naruto is going to circumvent Konoha's military code by using clan law, Sasuke replied. But it is only valid if he's part of a clan. Naruto smiled. The Hokage once told me that my family was once a powerful clan. He smiled proudly and pointed to the swirl on his jacket. This is my clan symbol. Sasuke smirked. This really was interesting and unexpected. He thought back to something Kakashi had once said. Naruto really was a most surprising ninja. An idiot, but a surprising idiot. Maybe even a savant, Sakura sighed. Alright. I'll need a decent calligraphy kit to pull this off. Naruto smiled and placed down in front of her along with a fine-looking scroll. Sasuke was impressed. Where did you get that? He asked. Naruto smiled. I broke into Gato's office building and found it laying around, Sakura scowled. That's stealing. Sasuke couldn't help but roll his eyes. Was she really that small-minded, or was she just looking for something to bitch about? Naruto frowned. No, it wasn't. Gato's dead, and besides, even if he wasn't, he was the bad guy who tried to kill us, so it doesn't count, she sighed. Alright. Slowly she opened the scroll and inked her brush. So you want this in kanji and as neat and official looking as possible? Naruto nodded. What do you want me to write? Naruto coughed, and cleared his breath. Okay, here we go. Let it be declared to all under heaven that on this date, the 8th of July in the 207th year since the birth of the Sage of the Six Paths, that under noble witness and in accordance with the most ancient and sacred laws of Hai no Kuni and Konohagakure no Sato, Rarai sat at the back of the small main room of their safe house and looked out over the sea with a frown on his face. This sucked. This really sucked. Really, there were few words that could properly describe how badly this all sucked. Though to be honest, that had pretty much been his life in a nutshell since he'd been enrolled in the Ninja Academy when he was 9. Forget that, since birth. Oh well, he wasn't one to bitch about his life, no matter how much it sucked. Across the room he could see the brothers looking over Mao's newest explosive seal. He loved his two friends, but their love of large explosions tended to end in trouble. He just hoped they didn't blow up the house again. Last time they did that, Zabuza-sensei had almost killed the lot of them, and it had only been Haku-sama who'd been able to get him to calm down. Now there was something that he didn't know what to think. Zabuza was dead. The fucker was actually gone. Part of him felt relieved, maybe even vindicated. Between his harsh training methods, foul temper, and the fact that his little betrayal had sent the three of them into exile with Hunter Knee nipping at their heels every time they tried to relax, he hated the man. On the other hand, he was going to miss him. Even though he was temperamental, he'd still been able to deal with the three of them, something he knew required the patience of a saint. He'd done his best to ensure that they were at least capable shinobi, and had protected them after his failed coup even though they were almost dead weight. With a sigh he pulled a small scroll out from his pack and laid it flat on the ground and activated the storage seal, and in a poof a steaming hot bottle of sake was waiting for him. It made him smile. He loved storage scrolls. The creak of the old floorboards make his head turn, and behind him he saw Haku enter the room. She looked sad, and that alone made him want to strangle that damn jonin. Not that he'd have a chance in hell against someone capable of taking out the demon of the mist. Still, what had he been smoking? Political mess over 3 bottom-rank ninja who'd been promoted to chunin based solely on their secondary skills, and a B-ranked criminal who, technically, wasn't even a missing nin? More like the head didn't want to do the paperwork. Lazy bastard. Haku-sama? He asked calmly. Would you like some sake? She tensed up slightly and grimaced. No, Rarii, I think I've had enough sake in the past days to last me a lifetime. He blinked in confusion, wondering what she meant as she walked over to the window and sat down, looking at the sea. He shook his head and threw back the bottle. Forget it. They'd suffered enough bullshit over the past weeks to last a lifetime. Zabuza was gone and Demon Brothers had been captured by Konoha, which meant they might as well be. With Haku injured and critically low on churka, that left it up to them to protect her should any hunter need show up. Oh well, eat, drink and be merry because tomorrow they were screwed. A sudden creak on the deck made him jump up. In a moment he channeled his chakra and stood ready to use his most powerful jutsu should the person at the deck prove to be hostile. The others reacted in a similar manner. Mao had a kunai at the ready and Karai was drawing his harisen. Even Haku was standing ready, a bit unsteadily with one of her senban drawn and ready. Together they stood for a long moment waiting, ready to fight and die, extracting a cost in blood against the bastards who hunted them should they be the ones on the other side of the door. It was almost anticlimactic when they heard a light knock. Haku glanced over to Karai and nodded to him, indicating that she wanted him to answer the door. Do I have to? He whispered. Make Mao do it. Haku replied with a glare and reluctantly he walked over and slid it open. A wave of relief washed over the room when they saw that it was Naruto, and that temperamental-looking quiet kid with the good hair. Naruto-kun, Haku said as she put away her senban. Come inside, please. The young boy smiled and he walked in and proudly held up an official scroll. I told you I'd figure out a way for you to come to Konoha and here it is. She blinked in confusion, an emotion that Rarii was quite intimate with, and looked at the scroll. May I? She asked. He nodded and handed her the scroll. She quickly opened it and read it. She quickly glanced back up with a stunned look of confusion. Is this what I think it is? She asked. Naruto nodded. And you're sure it'll work? She said, not quite convinced by whatever was written on that scroll. Traditional clan law predates the Konohagakure military code, the kid with the good hair began. One of the compromises made when the village was founded was that the military code wouldn't challenge the traditional rights of the clans. So this will work? She repeated. It'll let us come to Konoha and keep everyone safe? Rarii was a bit put off by the look on her face. She seemed to be a bit overwhelmed by whatever it was. Naruto nodded. Yeah. It's rock solid. There's no way they could say no. She nodded and looked down, obviously steeling herself for whatever was to come next. We need a brush. Naruto nodded and started to look in his pockets. The other boy simply smiled smugly and produced a fine-looking writing kit from his pockets. Oh, thanks Sasuke. Naruto took the brush from his friend and did something unexpected. He drew a kunai and cut one of his fingers. Dipping the tip of the brush in the blood, he signed his name to the scroll and passed the brush to Haku. She nodded and rinsed out the brush in a cup of cold tea that was sitting on the table. She then proceeded to repeat the process, cutting one of her fingers and signing in blood and then passing it to Sasuke, who then did the same. A pregnant pause fell across the room until Haku sighed and glanced over to them, and cracked a smile. Do you three swear to follow me loyally and do whatever I say? Of course, Haku-sama, he replied, wondering what the hell was going on. Sure, Karai said with a smile. Isn't that what we are doing already? Mao asked. Yes or no? Yes, Naruto grinned. Great. It's official and there's nothing Kakashi-sensei can do about it. Let's go show him. Hey, Mao, cut in. One thing, what the hell is going on? Naruto grinned and began to answer. Kakashi sucked in a deep breath and closed his eye as he read the scroll before him. To say that his emotions were mixed was like saying that molten lava was a mite warm and didn't make for a good bath. He was proud, but extremely annoyed. They had all gone behind his back on this one. He knew Sakura's handwriting and this had her all over it, and Sasuke had signed his name in blood on the bottom. But the real mastermind behind it was Naruto. Not only had he accomplished his goal, but he did it in a way that at the same time flaunted his contempt for his authority, by using the law to circumvent the wishes of his superiors. Not only couldn't he be punished for this, but anyone who even attempted to do so would bring the full weight of the clans down upon their heads simply to protect their own traditional privileges. It was brilliant, aggravating as hell, but brilliant. Just the kind of mad genius that one again proved that Naruto really was Konoha's most unpredictable genin. He was actually proud of all of them. Naruto had shown beyond a doubt that he'd do anything he could to keep his friend safe, and had done so in a way that had Kakashi himself evaluating his intelligence while at the same time doubting his sanity. Still, this whole ordeal left him with mixed feelings. His team had shown that they really could work as a team off of the battlefield. Still, he was left with one sinking feeling in his gut. The Hokage was not going to be pleased. Taking a deep breath, he lifted the document again and looked over it. There had to be some loophole that he could use to try and mitigate the Sandame's wrath. Let it be declared to all under heaven that on this date, the 8th of July in the 207th year since the birth of the Sage of the Six Paths, that under noble witness, and in accordance with the most ancient and sacred laws of Hai no Kuni and Konohagakure no Sato, that Momochi Haku of Mizu no Kuni has sworn the following oaths to Lord Naruto of Clan Uzumaki. I, Momochi Haku of Mizu no Kuni, do solemnly swear by the blood of my ancestors that I sever all previous bonds of loyalty and service, and that I will serve House Uzumaki faithfully, and dutifully with my life and my body freely and without question from now until the end of my line. Let it also be known that I, Momochi Haku, shall reaffirm all obligations made to my line and myself, in the sacred feudal tradition, so that their loyal service may enrich Clan Uzumaki for all time. This I swear. Let it be known that after hearing her oath and judging her sincerity as honest, Lord Naruto replied as follows. I, Lord Naruto of Clan Uzumaki, accepted the oath sworn before me and in return swear to value your life and happiness, as well as that of your servants, as I value my own. They shall not be spent cheaply, nor wastefully, nor will your freedoms be restricted without good reason. Let it be known to all that Lord Naruto of Clan Uzumaki has accepted the oath of Momochi Haku, by the most ancient and sacred laws of Hai no Kuni and Kanahigaku no Sado, for now and forevermore, Momochi Haku is now Uzumaki Haku, feudal retainer and adoptee of Clan Uzumaki. Lord Naruto of Clan Uzumaki, Momochi Haku of Mizu no Kuni, Lord Sasuke of Clan Uchiha. Kakashi sighed and lowered his head. Yep, just as he'd expected. Nothing. He'd read a couple feudal before, and as far as he knew, this was pretty much ironclad. There would be no continent out for him this time. Oh yeah, he was in deep shit. Naruto, he asked? How the hell do you know how to write a proper feudal oath? The boy smiled. The Hokage taught me all about it when I was a kid. Kakashi cringed and thought back. He'd spent a couple years during his span in ANBU as part of the Gaki's bodyguard detail, and he remembered clearly escorting the kid to the Hokage's office almost daily for over 2 years. It suddenly occurred to him how he badly underestimated him, and here he thought that the kid spent the entire time trying to get his hands on the old man's hat. Somewhere out there in the great beyond, Minato-sensei was laughing at him. He just knew it. Well then, Kakashi thought, if you can't beat them, join them. Naruto, he began, you did this because I said I wouldn't let them come with us, right? Yeah. He exclaimed. And now there's nothing you can do about it. Kakashi simply shook his head. Didn't my excuse seem just a little thin to you? Naruto nodded. Yeah. I bet you were just trying to dodge the paperwork. Kakashi almost felt offended. Wounded even. Did they really think that little of him? Do you really think I'm so lazy that I'd turn them away simply to dodge the paperwork? Yeah, Naruto replied with all of his characteristic bluntness. Sasuke for his part simply nodded. Looking at the others, Sakura blushed and muttered, "Hi, sensei." Kakashi couldn't help but wince. It almost felt like he was being kicked. Now, he knew he put on the air of being a lazy ass. It was a reputation that he'd worked long and hard to cultivate after all, but to get this from his genin, it meant they didn't respect him, and how could you teach someone who didn't respect you? How the hell was he going to deal with that? Well, he replied, forcing down the twisting feeling in his gut. Did it ever occur to you that this was a test? Haku blinked. What? Those who abandon their friends are worse than trash, Kakashi said, crossing his arms. I wanted to see how far you were willing to go. It was a test. I was judging your character. He looked to his genin. I was also judging theirs. I wanted to see if your heart was really in it, and while I knew that Naruto would stop at nothing to find a way for you to come with, I wanted to see if Sasuke and Sakura here were willing to help their teammate. I wasn't disappointed. This though, Kakashi sighed. I expected maybe Sakura to poke holes in my logic, or something like that, but I never expected anything so major. Haku frowned. And what if I'd left before you finished your sadistic test? Kakashi resisted the urge to snort. The girl was the former chief enforcer of and apprentice to the Demon of the Mist. While he'd admit the bell test was damn near impossible, to someone who'd killed his entire graduating class, that had to be child's play. When it came to sadism, he had nothing on her late master. I had intended to change my mind during Zabuza's funeral, Sakura scowled. You mean this was all for nothing? I wouldn't say for nothing, Kakashi replied. Naruto's clan just got a bit larger, which has to be worth something. Though you do know that now that the oath is made it can't be unmade. He paused. Well, unless Naruto decides to voluntarily release her from it. But that's up to him. Looking up to the 4 missing nin, he smiled under his mask. Welcome to Konoha, by the way. Glancing to the side, he saw Naruto slip out and sighed. Hold on, I seems that I've misplaced a genin. Haku looked over. I'll go get him. Kakashi looked her in the eye for a long moment and simply shrugged. Go right ahead. They probably needed to have a talk anyways. What if Naruto was in love with Haku? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.